My fiancé mocked me for being a waitress, calling it a dead-end job. He didn't know I owned the five-star restaurant where he dined every week, or that his favorite table was reserved under my name. When I personally served him, handed him a lifetime ban and revealed my net worth, his ego crumbled. The ring he gave me? I donated it to charity. You're just a waitress? With your talents. Derek's words echo in my mind as I stand before him, dinner check in one hand, ownership papers in the other. The shock spreading across his face is worth every moment I spent hiding in plain sight. I wasn't always the woman behind Evelyn's. 8 years ago I was just another culinary school graduate with big dreams and bigger student loans. My grandmother's diner was failing, a relic of comfort food in a neighborhood rapidly filling with trendy bistros and fusion restaurants. When she passed, leaving me the struggling establishment, my classmates called it a burden. I called it an opportunity. If you're enjoying this story about a woman who turned the tables on her judgmental fiancé, hit subscribe. It's free and you'll never miss another empowering story. Now let's see what happens next. The first year nearly broke me. 18-hour days, emptying my savings to replace ancient equipment, and learning the hard way that culinary school doesn't teach you about tax codes or payroll management. I slept on a cot in the storage room to save rent money, showering at the gym down the street before opening for breakfast service. During those brutal months I worked every position. Dishwasher, line cook, server, host, necessity becoming the most effective teacher. By year 3, Nana's Diner had transformed into Evelyn's, serving elevated comfort food that attracted food critics and locals alike. I remember trembling as I read the first review calling us Boston's hidden gem. 6 months later we earned our first Michelin star. The second came last year. Success changed everything except my Tuesday nights. While my executive chef handles the kitchen and Marco manages the floor, I still put on a simple black uniform, pull my hair back and serve tables. My staff initially thought it was micromanagement. Now they understand its preservation of my roots, my perspective, and the service standards that built our reputation. The owner waits tables on Tuesdays became whispered knowledge among regular patrons, a quirk that eventually made its way into a Boston magazine profile. I never confirmed it publicly. Most new customers have no idea and I prefer it that way. Something powerful happens when people speak honestly, believing you're just their server. That's how I met Derek. It was a rainy Friday, not my usual shift, but I was covering for Tina, whose babysitter had cancelled. He sat alone at the bar, suit jacket perfectly tailored, scrolling through his phone with one hand while nursing a Manhattan with the other. Another? I asked, notepad ready. When he looked up, something shifted in the room, that magnetic moment romance novels describe but I'd never experienced. His smile transformed his serious face, reaching his eyes in a way that seemed genuine rather than practiced. Only if you'll tell me your recommendation for dinner, he countered. I've been staring at this menu for 10 minutes, overwhelmed by choices. I recommended the braised short ribs, technically my grandmother's recipe, though we'd elevated it with a red wine reduction that took 12 hours to perfect. I trust someone who makes confident recommendations, he said, ordering exactly what I suggested. Later, when he raved about the meal, I felt the dual pride of chef and server, a sensation only I could fully appreciate. Derek returned the following week, requesting my section specifically, and the week after. Soon, his Friday visits became so regular that other servers would automatically direct him to my area. He'd arrive at 7, work still evident in his expression, but would leave relaxed, lingering over dessert while asking thoughtful questions about my day. What started as coffee after my shift evolved into proper dates. Walks along the Charles River, a jazz concert at Berkeley, dinner at competitors' restaurants where I took mental notes while pretending to be simply enjoying the meal. He talked about his work as a commercial real estate attorney, the skyscrapers he helped finance, the satisfaction of seeing buildings rise from contracts he'd negotiated. And you, he'd ask. What brought you to waitressing? Each time I navigated the question with partial truths. My culinary background, my love of the restaurant atmosphere, my connection to Evelyn specifically. I never lied, simply allowed him to form his own conclusions, watching carefully for his reaction. Other men I dated revealed themselves quickly when learning I just waited tables. Some viewed me as a project to rescue, others as someone conveniently unambitious who wouldn't compete with their success. Derek initially seemed different, interested in my perspectives regardless of their source, respectful of the service industry in ways that suggested character rather than calculation. 3 months into dating, I witnessed something that gave me pause. Derek had invited colleagues to Evelyn's, seated in Marco's section while I worked across the room. I watched from the corner of my eye as a new server, just 2 weeks on the job, mixed up their appetizer orders. Isn't management screening these people at all? Derek's voice carried just enough for me to catch the dismissive tone. This is why they'll always be replacing names on their name tags. His companions laughed. The server, a single mother working toward her nursing degree, blinked rapidly to hold back tears. That night I nearly told him everything. We were at his apartment, the skyline glittering beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, when he mentioned an upcoming client dinner. "I need to impress these investors," he said. "I was thinking, Evelyn's, your boss clearly runs a tight ship. Well, except for that one server." The words caught in my throat. Instead, I watched him from across the kitchen island, wondering if his respect for me was conditional. If knowing my true position would fundamentally change how he saw me as a person. The question haunted me even as our relationship deepened. The following week, seated at my reserved corner table without realizing its significance, Derek closed a major deal while I observed from the kitchen pass. His confidence was magnetic. His treatment of the staff was not. With each interaction I compiled mental notes, measuring his character while protecting my heart from fully committing. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment to reveal my ownership. In reality, I was testing him, a test I desperately wanted him to pass, even as evidence mounted that he might not. As spring melted into summer, my relationship with Derek deepened even as my deception grew more complex. 6 months in, we'd settled into a comfortable rhythm that required increasingly elaborate scheduling on my part. Mornings found me in meetings with suppliers, afternoons overseeing menu development, and evenings either in Derek's arms or managing service from behind the scenes, except when he dined at my restaurant, believing I was simply clocking in for another shift. "You work too hard for too little," Derek would say, kissing my forehead as I claimed exhaustion from a busy night of serving when I'd actually been reviewing quarterly financials in my office. The irony wasn't lost on me, but with each passing week, finding the right moment to reveal my true position became more daunting. I learned more about Derek's background during these months. The prestigious Boston law firm where he'd become the youngest partner in their commercial real estate division, his education at Harvard Law, the summer home in Cape Cod where his parents had hosted senators and CEOs. His world was one of legacy and connections, old money that opened doors I'd had to break down with sheer determination. "My father always said success is about positioning yourself next to power," he told me one evening as we shared wine on his balcony. "That's why I can't understand people who stay in dead-end jobs. There's always a ladder to climb if you're willing to look up." I bit my tongue, remembering my dishwasher Miguel who worked 3 jobs to put his daughter through college. His definition of success had nothing to do with proximity to power and everything to do with sacrifice and love. "Maybe some people find fulfillment in different ways," I offered carefully. Derek squeezed my hand. "That's what I adore about you, Evelyn. Always seeing the best in everyone. But trust me, nobody dreams of serving others their whole life." If he only knew that my serving others had built a business worth millions, now expanding to a second location across town. The construction updates came to my personal phone, which I guarded carefully around him. Despite these moments of disconnect, there were countless others filled with genuine connection. Derek's laugh, a full-bodied sound that seemed to surprise even him, became my favorite melody. He remembered small details, that I preferred lilies to roses, that thunderstorms made me anxious, that I couldn't stand the texture of coconut. On Sunday mornings he'd bring coffee to bed and read me sections of the newspaper, his commentary making me laugh until my sides hurt. "Imagine us doing this in Paris," he'd say, or, "Next year, we could be waking up to this view in Tokyo." Our shared travel bucket list grew longer with each conversation. When he spoke of the future, I allowed myself to believe we could bridge the gap between our worlds. Then came the night Derek finally met Marco properly. I'd mentioned my manager frequently, and Derek suggested dinner at Evelyn's where the 3 of us could chat after my shift. Marco, who'd been with me since we survived that first brutal year together, knew exactly how to play his role while subtly enjoying the irony. "The restaurant industry is fundamentally about illusion," Derek proclaimed after his second scotch, while I pretended to be off duty, joining them in casual clothes. Customers think they're paying for food, but they're really paying for the experience, the prestige of the reservation. Marco caught my eye, the corner of his mouth twitching. And what would you suggest is the most important aspect of managing that illusion? Strong leadership, obviously, Derek continued, warming to his topic. The problem with most restaurants is that ownership is disconnected from daily operations. If I owned a place like Evelyn's, I'd implement performance metrics for every position. The industry accepts too much mediocrity. Marco choked slightly on his drink. Fascinating perspective. Any other insights into our little world? I shot Marco a warning look as Derek launched into a detailed critique of restaurant profit margins and labor costs, quoting statistics that were actually outdated by several years. Marco's expression remained neutral, though I could read the amusement in his eyes, the inside joke between us stretching taut as a wire. Evelyn here has excellent instincts, Marco said finally, gently steering the conversation away from dangerous waters. She understands this business better than most owners I've worked for. Derek smiled indulgently, placing his hand over mine. She's certainly exceptional. Though I keep telling her she could be using those instincts in a field with actual career advancement. The words stung more than they should have, especially with Marco witnessing them. Later that night, alone in my actual office after both men had departed, I considered ending the charade. But something held me back. Perhaps pride, perhaps fear, perhaps the unsettling realization that I still didn't know which version of myself Derek had actually fallen in love with. 2 weeks later, on a perfect autumn evening, Derek suggested a walk along Boston Harbor. The October air carried the crispness of changing seasons, golden light softening the city's edges as sunset approached. He seemed unusually quiet, checking his watch several times as he guided me toward a specific viewpoint overlooking the water. "This is where my grandparents first met," he said suddenly. "My grandfather was shipping out to Europe during the war. My grandmother came to say goodbye, not knowing if she'd ever see him again." Before I could respond, he was kneeling, a small velvet box in his hand, the setting sun igniting the diamond inside as he opened it. The ring was stunning vintage style with a center stone that caught fire in the dying light. "Evelyn Matthews, you've brought something to my life I didn't know was missing. Your kindness, your grace, your unwavering support of my ambitions, you make me want to be worthy of you every day." His voice carried the rare vulnerability that always melted my defenses. "Will you marry me?" Time suspended as conflicting emotions collided within me. Joy at the sincerity in his eyes. Pride in how far we'd both come from our first meeting. Anxiety about the secret still standing between us. And underneath it all, the unsettling question. Did he love me or the version of me he thought he knew? "Yes," I heard myself say, tears blurring my vision as he slipped the ring onto my finger. The weight of it felt simultaneously right and wrong, like a key that almost fit the lock. As he pulled me into his arms, the harbor lights beginning to twinkle around us, I made a silent promise to myself. Before we set a wedding date, Derek would know everything. The question that haunted me as we celebrated that night wasn't whether he'd be impressed by my success, but whether he'd forgive the omission, and whether the woman he wanted to marry would still exist in his eyes once the waitress disguise was gone. The diamond on my finger caught the morning light as I packed my essentials into carefully labeled boxes. Derek had insisted I move into his Beacon Hill condominium. No fiancé of mine should be living in that tiny apartment in Somerville. And after weeks of gentle pressure, I'd agreed. What I couldn't explain was how that tiny apartment was actually a convenient fiction. My real home was a brownstone in Back Bay that I'd purchased outright after our second Michelin star. Moving day became an elaborate choreography of deception. I transferred clothes, books, and personal items from my rarely used apartment, while claiming my irregular hours at the restaurant made it impossible for Derek to help. In reality, I was shuttling financial documents, business plans, and the keepsakes that told the true story of my success to a newly rented storage unit. Finally, Derek murmured that first night, pulling me close as we stood on his, now our balcony. "Having you here makes this place feel like home." His sincerity made my heart ache. Every genuine moment between us was scaffolded by falsehoods, a beautiful structure built on an increasingly unstable foundation. My new living arrangement complicated an already intricate schedule. Most mornings I'd slip out while Derek showered, claiming early breakfast shifts but actually heading to manager meetings or supplier negotiations. Afternoons required careful coordination with Marco and my assistant to ensure calls were screened and messages secured. Evening returns to the condo often meant explaining away the scent of kitchen spices that clung to my hair despite changing out of chef's whites into waitress attire before coming home. Your dedication to that place is admirable, if misplaced, Derek commented one evening when I arrived home exhausted after a 16-hour day combining actual service and secret management. Though honestly, at some point you need to think about your future. Our future. The first cracks appeared 3 weeks after moving in. Derek's law firm was hosting a charity gala, and he'd spent days dropping hints about appropriate attire and behavior. Just follow my lead with the senior partners, he advised while adjusting his bow tie. They can be traditional about their wives' roles. I'm not their wife, I pointed out, smoothing the simple black dress I'd chosen, coincidentally similar to my waitstaff uniform, though significantly more expensive. And I'm not yours yet either. Derek's smile didn't reach his eyes. But you will be. And first impressions matter in my world, Evelyn. His world. As if mine didn't exist at all. At the gala, surrounded by Boston's elite in a hotel ballroom dripping with crystal and privilege, I recognized several of my regular customers, including the restaurant critic who'd written Evelyn's first glowing review. I angled my body away, grateful I'd worn my hair differently than my usual work style. And what do you do, dear? Asked the silver-haired wife of Derek's managing partner. Before I could answer, Derek's arm tightened around my waist. Evelyn's just a waitress for now, he interjected smoothly. At Evelyn's downtown. Quite a coincidence with the name, isn't it? Just a waitress. The words landed like small, precise cuts. How quaint, the woman replied, her expression suggesting she'd discovered something unpleasant on her shoe. And do you have plans for something more substantial? Derek answered for me again. We're exploring options at the firm. Perhaps something in client relations. Later, in the taxi home, the silence between us stretched taut until I finally broke it. You answered for me. Twice. I was helping, Derek said, scrolling through emails on his phone. Those people can be judgmental. About waitresses? He sighed, taking my hand. Sweetheart, you know your job doesn't matter to me. I make more than enough for both of us. I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable in these situations. I didn't feel uncomfortable until you spoke for me. The argument simmered without resolution, the first of many. Small comments accumulated like snowflakes, light individually but building toward an avalanche. Derek suggesting I look into secretarial courses. Derek mentioning his colleague's wife who used to be a barista before finding her true calling in event planning. Derek leaving brochures for professional image consulting on the kitchen counter. My silent resistance only strengthened his campaign. I began finding job listings marked in red pen on the counter, positions that required neither education nor experience. Administrative assistants, receptionists, retail associates. I'm not ashamed of being a waitress, I told him after finding yet another circled want ad. Of course not, he replied, kissing my forehead. It's admirable how you've stuck with it. I just think you're capable of so much more. The irony burned like acid. Vanessa, my head chef and closest friend since culinary school, became my sole confidant. During menu tastings and inventory reviews, meetings masked as friendly coffee dates to Derek, she witnessed my growing unease. This is madness, Ev, she said, chopping herbs with alarming precision in my restaurant kitchen after hours. You're running one of Boston's most successful restaurants while pretending to be Cinderella before the ball. For what? A man who thinks waiting tables is beneath him. It's complicated, I insisted, sampling her latest sauce creation. He has good qualities. He's driven, intelligent, caring when it matters. Caring when it's convenient, she corrected. What happens when he discovers the truth? Do you think his ego can handle learning his little waitress has been his boss all along? Men like Derek don't magically develop respect for things they've openly disdained. Her words haunted me for days, amplified by Derek's increasing suggestions about my career prospects. The engagement ring felt heavier each day, the deadline for truth drawing closer as Derek began mentioning wedding venues and dates. Then came the night I nearly confessed everything. I'd prepared carefully, financial statements demonstrating my success, press clippings about the restaurant, even the keys to my actual home in Back Bay. I'd made his favorite meal, ironically, using the recipe from Evelyn's, and opened a bottle of wine we'd been saving. "I need to tell you something important," I began as we finished dinner. Derek's face lit up. "What a coincidence, I have news too. But you first." The earnest excitement in his eyes made me hesitate. "Actually, you go ahead. I got the promotion." He practically bounded from his chair. "Senior partner effective immediately. The youngest in firm history." He pulled me up into a spinning hug, his joy infectious despite my internal turmoil. "And you know what this means. A significant raise, a corner office, and," he paused dramatically, "you can finally quit that waitressing job." He continued without noticing my frozen expression. "No more late nights, no more serving other people. You can focus on planning our wedding, setting up our home properly." His hands framed my face. "I told you I'd take care of everything, didn't I?" I forced a smile, the folder of revelations burning a hole in my desk drawer where I'd hastily hidden it before dinner. "Congratulations. I'm so proud of you." That night, as Derek slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling, Vanessa's warning echoing in my thoughts. The truth wouldn't set me free, not yet. First, I needed to understand exactly what would happen when Derek's perception of me shattered, when the power dynamic he'd carefully constructed inverted completely. The decision crystallized in the pre-dawn darkness. I would reveal myself, but on my terms, with witnesses who would ensure the truth couldn't be rewritten afterward. Derek had shown me who he was through 100 small moments. Now it was time for me to show him who I really was. My revelation would have to wait for the perfect moment. In the meantime, Derek's promotion accelerated both his ego and his presence at my restaurant. What had been occasional Friday dinners evolved into multiple weekly visits as he entertained clients, celebrated wins with colleagues, and established himself as a regular the staff needed to recognize. "I want to reserve our special table again," he'd say on calls. I now intercepted myself, amused by the irony. The corner booth with panoramic city views, the one he'd fallen in love with during our early dating days, was technically reserved permanently under E. Matthews, owner, in our system. "Of course, Mr. Shepherd," I'd reply, professional as always. "We'll have your usual table waiting." He never questioned how he always secured the most coveted spot in the restaurant, even during peak hours when waiting lists stretched weeks long. The satisfaction of exclusivity overrode any curiosity about why this particular table remained mysteriously available for him. Navigating Derek's increased patronage required elaborate choreography. I worked with Marco to ensure I only waited on Derek's table every third or fourth visit. Enough to maintain our connection, but not so frequent it would interfere with my actual management duties or raise questions about coincidence. "He's here again," Vanessa would text from the kitchen, our private signal prompting me to either don my waitress uniform or retreat to my office, depending on our predetermined schedule. On nights I wasn't serving, I'd observe from strategic positions, reviewing wine selections with the sommelier, discussing menu adjustments with the maitre d', or simply pretending to dine alone at the bar. These vantage points provided unexpected insights into Derek's true character. With important clients, he was charm personified, attentive, generous with compliments, and liberal with expensive wine orders. With colleagues of equal or higher status, he maintained an easy camaraderie, laughing at their jokes while subtly inserting references to his own accomplishments. But with junior associates or support staff, a different Derek emerged. Impatient, dismissive, measuring their worth by how quickly they anticipated his needs. Most revealing was his treatment of my staff. Derek's please and thank you appeared reliably for senior servers like Marcus and Sophia, vanished entirely for food runners and bussers, and fluctuated wildly for newer staff based on their performance. The incident with Ryan crystallized everything. He was 19, working to pay for community college classes, earnest and eager but still learning the choreography of fine dining service. It was only his second week when he was assigned to assist on Derek's table during a lunch with 3 potential clients. I was in the kitchen reviewing invoices when I heard the commotion. A crash, followed by raised voices. Stepping onto the floor, I witnessed Ryan frozen in horror, a water pitcher clutched in his trembling hands, while Derek's associate frantically blotted his suit sleeve. "Is this how you run your establishment?" Derek's voice carried across the hushed dining room as he addressed Marco. Hiring incompetent children who can't even pour water? Ryan's face flushed crimson. Sir, I'm so sorry. I don't want your apology, Derek snapped, cutting him off with a dismissive wave. I want you gone. This suit costs more than you make in a month. I moved toward them instinctively, manager mode overriding fiancé concerns, but Marco caught my eye with a subtle head shake, a reminder of our precarious situation. Instead, I watched from behind a service column as Marco handled the situation with practiced diplomacy, offering sincere apologies, complimentary lunch and vouchers for future visits. We'll address this with the server immediately, Marco assured them smoothly while signaling Ryan to retreat to the kitchen where I followed him. He wants me fired, Ryan choked out, tears threatening. It was an accident. My hand just slipped. I placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. You're not getting fired for an accident, Ryan. This is a teaching moment, not a termination one. The relief in his eyes made the deception worth it, even as I processed Derek's casual cruelty. Later, when Derek called to express further outrage about that incompetent boy, I found myself maintaining my waitress persona while defending my management's decision to keep Ryan on staff. Marco said he's giving him another chance, I explained, my voice carefully modulated. Everyone deserves that, don't they? Not in business, Derek replied flatly. One mistake reflects poorly on everyone. If my associates think the restaurant tolerates incompetence, that reflects poorly on me for recommending it. His concern wasn't for the water-spotted suit or the momentary disruption, but for his own image. Another hairline fracture in the increasingly damaged picture I had of our relationship. As weeks passed, these fractures multiplied. Derek's complaints about my schedule intensified, particularly when I needed to cancel plans for legitimate restaurant emergencies that I could only vaguely explain. It's Tuesday night, he argued during one particularly heated exchange when a refrigeration failure required my immediate attention. You've already worked a full day. Why can't someone else handle a busy dinner service? It's complicated, I responded, gathering my keys. Tuesday nights are my responsibility. More important than our dinner with the Harringtons? They're only in town tonight and Richard could be a significant client. I'm sorry, but yes. This once it is. His expression hardened. I'm starting to think you're not serious about our future, Evelyn. A waitress job shouldn't take precedence over your fiancé's career. The words stung despite their inaccuracy. I was choosing my career over his, just not the career he thought I had. These arguments became our new normal, his frustration building with each rain check, each late-night return to the condo, each morning departing before dawn. The engagement that had once felt promising now hung between us like an unasked question. The final crack appeared unexpectedly on a rare Sunday morning together. Derek was showering when his phone chimed repeatedly on the nightstand. Normally, I'd never invade his privacy, but the screen lit up with a name I recognized. Brandon, his closest friend and frequent dinner guest at Evelyn's. The preview displayed just enough text to catch my attention. Still can't believe you're marrying the waitress. Bold move, man. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that even as my finger pressed his password. My birth date, a gesture once endearing and now feeling calculated. The full message thread appeared, weeks of exchanges illuminated in damning blue bubbles. Marrying down keeps expectations manageable, Derek had written just yesterday. Plus she's gorgeous and grateful for everything. Win-win. Classic savior complex, Brandon replied with a laughing emoji. Rescuing her from a life of serving others. She'll make a perfect corporate wife once I polish off the rough edges. Each message burned deeper than the last, confirming every doubt I'd tried to dismiss. The Derek who spoke so gently to me, who promised partnership and respect, was an illusion carefully maintained for my benefit. The real Derek, the one who spoke freely with friends, saw our relationship as an exercise in benevolent control, a project rather than a partnership. I replaced the phone exactly as I'd found it, my hands surprisingly steady despite the storm brewing inside. By the time Derek emerged from the shower, I'd composed my features into a mask of normalcy, excusing myself to pick up an extra shift, while my mind calculated a very different kind of shift about to occur. Driving toward Evelyn's, I finally admitted what I'd known for weeks. The revelation I'd been planning could no longer be a gentle unveiling of truth. It needed to be a reckoning, one that would force Derek to confront not just my deception but his own. The text messages weighed on me all week, coloring every interaction with Derek. I scrutinized his expressions for signs of the condescension he'd revealed to Brandon, analyzed his compliments for hidden patronization. Though nothing had technically changed between us, everything felt different, as if a veil had been lifted, revealing harsh lighting where I'd once seen a warm glow. I might have confronted him immediately if not for the looming Sunday dinner at his parents' suburban estate. Derek had been orchestrating this meeting for weeks, dropping hints about its importance and coaching me on appropriate topics of conversation. "Just be yourself," he'd said, then immediately contradicted himself with, "But maybe don't talk too much about the restaurant." Another time, "My mother appreciates people who dress with understated elegance." And later, "Dad respects ambition, so focus on your goals rather than your current situation." By Sunday morning, I'd received so many contradictory instructions that I felt like an actress without a coherent script. Standing in front of our closet, his closet really where my clothes occupied a carefully measured third of the space, I chose a simple navy dress that projected the understated elegance Derek had emphasized. "Perfect," he approved, adjusting his tie in the mirror beside me. "Conservative but not boring. Dad will appreciate that." The drive to Westwood took 40 minutes, each passing mile ratcheting up Derek's nervous energy. He quizzed me about his parents' accomplishments, his father's law firm which he'd built from nothing, his mother's chairmanship of 3 charitable boards, their preferences, Bordeaux wines, conservative politics, traditional gender roles, and their expectations, grandchildren within 2 years, holiday gatherings at their estate, continuation of family traditions I hadn't known existed until that moment. "Remember," he said as we turned onto a tree-lined drive that seemed to stretch endlessly through manicured grounds, "first impressions are everything to them." The Shepherd estate loomed ahead, a colonial revival mansion that wouldn't have looked out of place in a historical documentary. Standing at the mahogany front door, Derek squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. "Ready?" I nodded, though in truth I felt anything but. The door opened before he could knock, revealing not his parents but a uniformed housekeeper who ushered us through a marble-floored foyer into a formal living room where the elder Shepherds waited. Patricia Shepherd rose first, a slender woman in her 60s with immaculate silver hair and the same sharp blue eyes as her son. "Derek, darling," she said, accepting his kiss on her cheek before turning her assessing gaze to me. "And you must be Evelyn." Her handshake was brief, her smile not reaching her eyes. Behind her, Richard Shepherd remained seated, a tumbler of amber liquid in one hand as he nodded in acknowledgement. "Sit down, son," he said, indicating the sofa across from him. "Tell me about the Harrington deal. Did they sign?" No greeting for me, no expression of pleasure at meeting his son's fiancée. Just business, immediate and exclusive. Derek launched into deal specifics while I perched uncomfortably beside him, Patricia's gaze cataloging me with unsettling thoroughness. When a second housekeeper appeared with drinks, Derek automatically ordered for me without asking my preference. "White wine for my fiancée," he told the woman. "She prefers something sweet." I didn't actually. I preferred complex reds with earthy undertones, knowledge earned through years of wine tastings with suppliers and sommeliers. But contradicting him seemed petty in that moment, so I accepted the too-sweet Riesling with a polite smile. "Derek tells us you work at Evelyn's," Patricia finally addressed me when the men's business discussion lulled. "Such a coincidence with your name." "Yes, it's become something of a joke among the staff," I replied, the half-truth coming easily after months of practice. "Waiting tables, is it?" Richard asked, his gaze sharpening. "Temporarily, I assume." "Dad," Derek interjected with a nervous laugh, "not everyone follows a traditional career path." "Clearly," Richard replied, the single word carrying volumes of judgment. "But surely there are plans for something more appropriate?" He directed this question at Derek rather than me, as if I weren't capable of answering for myself. "We've discussed several options," Derek answered smoothly. "Client relations at the firm, perhaps, or event coordination. Evelyn has excellent people skills." "I actually enjoy the restaurant industry," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I expected. "I find it fulfilling." Patricia and Richard exchanged a glance so laden with meaning it might as well have been audible. Disappointment. Concern. Judgment. "Well," Patricia said with forced brightness, "being a waitress certainly teaches valuable skills. Organization. patience with difficult people. Following instructions precisely. Like a well-trained dog, I thought bitterly. Derek mentioned you attended culinary school, Richard pressed. Yet you're serving food rather than preparing it? Before I could answer, the conversation was interrupted by the dinner announcement. Throughout the elaborate four-course meal skillfully prepared by their private chef, the interrogation continued under the guise of polite interest. Did I have family money? No. Had I considered finishing my bachelor's degree? I had, along with my MBA, which I'd completed 3 years earlier. What were my thoughts on children and the importance of being present for their formative years? A thinly veiled suggestion that my work hours were incompatible with proper motherhood. With each question, Derek stepped in to shape my answers into something more palatable for his parents, editing my life story in real time to fit their expectations. By dessert, I barely recognized the woman they were discussing. This simplified, aspirational version of Evelyn who just needed proper guidance to blossom into an appropriate shepherd wife. You have potential, Richard told me directly as we prepared to leave, the statement landing like an insult rather than the compliment he clearly intended. With Derek's guidance and the right connections, you could find a much more suitable position. Our family has standards to maintain. The silence in the car lasted until we'd cleared the estate's gates. Then Derek exhaled loudly, loosening his tie with one hand. That went better than I expected, he said, oblivious to my simmering anger. Dad actually said you have potential. That's high praise from him. Potential for what, exactly? To evolve beyond my embarrassing job? To become suitable for your family? Derek's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. They're old-fashioned, Evelyn. You knew that going in. And frankly, you could have made more effort to highlight your strengths instead of repeatedly bringing up the restaurant. I answered their questions honestly. Should I have lied? You should have emphasized your ambitions beyond serving food, he snapped, his carefully maintained facade cracking. They're concerned about your integration into our social circle. Dad's colleagues' wives run charities, manage foundations, support their husbands' careers. They don't work nights and weekends carrying plates. So I'm an embarrassment? You're making this unnecessarily difficult. Derek's voice took on the same patronizing tone he'd used with Ryan after the water spill. I'm trying to help you see the bigger picture. My world has certain expectations, and if we're going to build a life together, you need to aim higher. I'm doing you a favor by marrying someone with your limited prospects. The least you could do is show some willingness to adapt. There it was, the brutal truth I'd glimpsed in his text messages, now spoken aloud. The remaining drive passed in frigid silence, Derek occasionally sighing dramatically as if I were the unreasonable one. At home, he retreated to his office, door firmly closed, while I stood on the balcony, twisting the diamond ring that now felt like a brand of ownership rather than a symbol of partnership. Each facet catching the city lights reminded me of a different falsehood, a different compromise, a different piece of myself I'd allowed to be diminished. Later, I lay awake beside Derek's sleeping form, staring at the ceiling as clarity washed over me in waves. The charade had gone on too long, damaging not just our relationship but my own self-respect. I'd built a restaurant on principles of honesty, quality, and respect for everyone from dishwashers to diners. Yet I'd allowed myself to become entangled with a man who embodied none of those values. No more hiding. No more pretending. No more silent acquiescence. As dawn broke over Boston, painting the sky in shades of possibility, I slipped from bed and made my first call of the day. Marco? It's me. I need you to make some changes to Thursday's reservations. Derek's bringing important clients. I want everything perfect. The usual table? He asked. Yes, I confirmed, a plan crystallizing with exquisite clarity. But this time I'll be his server. And nothing goes wrong until I decide it does. The 4 days between my dawn decision and Thursday evening unfolded with a strange, calm clarity. I moved through our shared space like a ghost, avoiding Derek without appearing to do so. Early mornings at the restaurant, late nights reviewing inventory. He barely noticed, consumed with preparation for what he kept calling the meeting that will define my career. Tuesday afternoon, his call lit up my private line, the one reserved for actual restaurant business. Reservation for Thursday at 7, he said without preamble, not recognizing my professional voice. Derek Shepherd, party of 4. I need the corner table, Of course, Mr. Shepherd, I replied, maintaining my professional tone while signaling Marco, who stood nearby reviewing staffing schedules, to listen in. May I ask the occasion? Meeting with Japanese investors, he replied, pride evident even through the phone line. 7-figure potential deal. Everything needs to be perfect. Wine recommendations ready, no delays between courses, your best server. I'll personally ensure everything meets your standards, I promised, the double meaning making Marco raise his eyebrows. Perfect. And Evelyn? I froze momentarily before realizing he thought he was speaking to a reservation manager who merely shared my name. My fiancé occasionally waits tables there. If she's working Thursday, please make sure she's nowhere near our section. It would be awkward. My fingers tightened around the pen I'd been using to note his preferences. I understand completely, sir. We'll make appropriate arrangements. After ending the call, I met Marco's concerned gaze. You heard. He nodded slowly. Every word. Are you sure about this, Ev? I've never been more certain of anything, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Call a staff meeting for tomorrow morning. Essential personnel only. Wednesday's meeting included only those I trusted implicitly, Marco, Vanessa, my sommelier James, and the senior servers who'd been with me since the beginning. Their expressions ranged from shock to vindictive delight as I outlined the situation and my planned response. He doesn't deserve you, Vanessa said flatly when I finished. Never did. This isn't about what he deserves, I corrected her. It's about standing in my truth after hiding it for too long. No drama, no public scene, just fact and consequence. We spent 2 hours planning every detail. The precise timing of courses, who would serve the accompanying tables, the exact moment I would appear. James selected wines specifically paired to complement both the food and the mounting tension of the evening. Vanessa designed a special menu that showcased our most sophisticated offerings, dishes that required perfect precision and presentation. What about the letter? Marco asked quietly as the meeting concluded. I'd already drafted it. A simple, dignified statement revoking Derek's dining privileges, explaining that Evelyn's was built on respect for all regardless of position, and that his consistent treatment of staff violated our core values. No emotional language, no accusation, just clear boundaries. It's ready, I told him, along with the paperwork documenting my ownership, awards, and financial statements. Everything will be in the check presenter when the moment comes. Thursday arrived with the crystalline perfection of early autumn. I spent the day in methodical preparation, a final review of the special menu with Vanessa, confirmation of the investors' backgrounds with James to ensure appropriate wine knowledge, a brief meditation in my office to center myself. At 5, I changed into what I'd privately labeled my Revelation uniform, not the standard black attire of our service staff, but a tailored dress in the same shade, subtle enough to function as waitstaff clothing while clearly signaling my actual position to anyone paying attention. My grandmother's small gold watch adorned my wrist, a reminder of where I'd started and the legacy I was protecting. Marco found me adjusting my hair in the staff room mirror at 6:30. They're 15 minutes out. Traffic on the expressway. He placed a supportive hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. We're all with you. I nodded, emotion threatening to crack my composed facade for the first time all week. Thank you. For everything. At precisely 7, Derek swept through our doors, 3 distinguished Japanese businessmen in tow. From my vantage point near the kitchen, I watched Marco greet them with professional courtesy, leading them to the corner table. My table, with its spectacular city view now enhanced by the setting sun painting Boston's skyline in hues of gold and amber. I allowed them time to settle. Drinks ordered, pleasantries exchanged, menus presented. Through the kitchen pass, I observed Derek in his element, commanding the table with practiced charm, making a show of his familiarity with the restaurant, his confident wine selection, his casual reference to returning at least weekly to this neighborhood gem. At precisely the right moment, I stepped from the shadows, approaching their table with the composed grace I'd practiced since culinary school. Derek noticed me when I was 3 steps away, his expression cycling rapidly from confusion to alarm to forced nonchalance. Gentlemen, he said, voice pitched slightly higher than normal, this is actually my fiancée Evelyn. She works here. The executives offered polite nods as I smiled professionally. Good evening and welcome to Evelyn's, I said, my focus deliberately inclusive of all four men rather than centered on Derek. I'll be your server tonight. May I start you with sparkling water for the table? Derek's laugh sounded strangled. Sweetheart, I didn't realize you were working tonight. Isn't Sophia usually on this section? I wanted to personally ensure everything was perfect for your important meeting, I replied smoothly, pouring water with practiced precision. Our chef has prepared several specials I believe would impress your guests. What followed was the most meticulously orchestrated service of my career. I described each dish with expert knowledge no mere server could possess, recommended wine pairings with the confidence of an owner, and maintained a professional demeanor that gave nothing away while setting the stage for everything to come. Throughout the meal, Derek's discomfort grew visibly. He interrupted my descriptions, rushed through wine selections, and repeatedly made small comments designed to diminish my role. She's only doing this temporarily, he told the investors during the appetizer course, a deliberate emphasis on temporarily that made my spine stiffen. Such dedication to service, the senior investor observed, clearly more impressed than Derek intended. By the main course, Derek's patience had visibly frayed. When I approached to check on their satisfaction, he cut me off mid-sentence. We're fine, Evelyn. I think the gentleman would prefer to discuss business without constant interruptions. Of course, I replied coolly. Though as owner, I find it valuable to ensure guests are enjoying their experience. The word owner hung in the air for a beat before Derek forced another laugh. She means she owns the responsibility for her tables. English idioms can be confusing. The investors nodded politely, but I noticed their shrewd glances. These were businessmen who recognized power dynamics shifting in real time. When dessert arrived, Derek's frustration finally boiled over. As I described the deconstructed chocolate torte, a recipe that had earned us a feature in Food and Wine, he cut me off harshly. This is exactly why you need to quit this dead-end job, he hissed, forgetting his audience momentarily. Hovering over tables, prattling about food. It's embarrassing. The table fell silent. The senior investor's eyes widened slightly. I straightened, feeling a profound calm settle over me. I'll return shortly with your check, gentlemen. In the kitchen, Marco handed me the prepared check presenter without a word, his eyes conveying both support and concern. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and returned to the table. Thank you for dining with us tonight, I said, placing the leather folder precisely in front of Derek. Inside you'll find your bill, along with a letter regarding your future dining privileges at Evelyn's and documentation you may find informative. Derek opened the folder, confusion giving way to shock as he scanned the contents. I should introduce myself properly, I continued, addressing the investors directly. I'm Evelyn Matthews, owner and founder of Evelyn's. I established this restaurant 8 years ago after graduating from the New England Culinary Institute and have since been honored with 2 Michelin stars and numerous industry awards. The senior investor's face transformed with new respect and understanding, while his colleagues murmured appreciatively. Matthews Sen, he said, inclining his head slightly. Most impressive establishment. Thank you, I replied, then turned my gaze to Derek, whose face had drained of all color. Unfortunately, Mr. Shepherd will no longer be welcome here due to his consistent disrespect toward our staff, a core violation of our values. You gentlemen, however, are welcome anytime. I slid my engagement ring from my finger and placed it gently beside the check presenter. This belongs with you, I said quietly to Derek. As does your perception of me as someone needing rescue. I wish you well, but not in my restaurant and not in my life. With that, I turned and walked away, my back straight, my steps sure, feeling lighter than I had in months, perhaps years. Behind me, I heard the senior investor say something in rapid Japanese, followed by the scraping of chairs. Whatever deal Derek had hoped to close that night unraveled as quickly as our relationship, but unlike him, I felt nothing but relief watching it all come apart. I didn't look back as I walked through the restaurant, past curious staff and oblivious diners. Marco fell into step beside me as I reached the kitchen. It's done, I said simply. Vanessa abandoned her station at the pass, engulfing me in a fierce hug that smelled of rosemary and redemption. You okay? Surprisingly, yes. And I was. The weight of deception had lifted, leaving behind a curious lightness I'd forgotten could exist. He's leaving, James announced, appearing in the kitchen doorway. Looks shell-shocked. The investors are staying. Asked to speak with the owner if possible. I smoothed my dress, squared my shoulders. I'll meet them in the private dining room. James, bring a bottle of the Yamazaki 18. Hosting the Japanese executives afterward felt like my first authentic professional interaction in months. They were impressed by my business acumen, intrigued by my journey from culinary school to Michelin stars, and respectfully curious about my expansion plans. By evening's end, I'd secured not only their respect but potential investment in my second location. A perfect, unexpected symmetry to Derek's shattered deal. Remarkable recovery, the senior investor, Mr. Tanaka, commented as they prepared to leave. Most impressive aspect of your business tonight. I didn't need to ask what he meant. In business as in life, true character reveals itself in moments of disruption. The texts began at midnight. Frantic, disbelieving messages from Derek cycling through anger, bargaining, and wounded pride. I read each one just once before silencing my phone, sleeping more peacefully than I had in months. Morning brought a bouquet of lilies so enormous they barely fit through the door of my Back Bay brownstone, the home Derek never knew existed. The card read simply, "We need to talk. Please." I donated the flowers to a nearby nursing home. Derek appeared at the restaurant the following evening despite the ban, looking haggard and humbled in a way I'd never seen before. 5 minutes, he pleaded when Marco moved to escort him out. Just 5 minutes with her. I agreed, more out of curiosity than compassion, meeting him in my office. The space he'd never known existed behind the unassuming door marked private. This is. He gestured helplessly at the tasteful decor, the wall of awards, the framed reviews. I don't understand, Evelyn. Why didn't you tell me? I tried initially, I replied, remaining standing while he perched uncomfortably on the edge of a visitor chair. But then I saw how you treated servers, how you spoke about people trapped in service jobs, and I realized something important. You didn't respect me as a waitress. Would you have dated me at all if you'd known the truth from the beginning? Of course I would have. You're successful, accomplished. Exactly. You would have respected my accomplishments, not me as a person. That's the difference, Derek. I wanted someone who valued people regardless of their position or status. You failed that test consistently. That's not fair. I loved you, he protested, looking genuinely wounded. You loved a projection, a convenient fantasy of rescuing someone you perceived as beneath you. You loved how I made you feel, not who I actually was. I can change. Now that I understand. That's just it, I interrupted gently. You shouldn't need to change to treat people with dignity. It should be fundamental. His expression hardened slightly, revealing the Derek I'd glimpsed in unguarded moments. This is about status for you, isn't it? Some twisted revenge because you felt judged. I smiled sadly. No, Derek. It's about integrity. The same standards I apply to my restaurant, my staff, and myself. I won't compromise on that. Not for business and not for love. He left without further argument, the engagement ring in his pocket despite my suggestion that he donate it to charity. I suspected his pride couldn't handle that final submission. The following weeks brought more attempts. Emails outlining how we could start fresh. Messages from mutual acquaintances suggesting I was being harsh. Even a desperate call to Vanessa seeking her intervention. Each attempt arrived with diminishing force and conviction, like waves gradually losing power as they reached shore. Meanwhile, I reclaimed pieces of myself I'd carefully hidden away. I moved fully back into my own home, the space that reflected my actual taste and achievements. I reconnected with industry colleagues I'd avoided for fear of exposing my charade. I even gave an interview to Boston Magazine about female entrepreneurship in the restaurant industry, finally stepping fully into the public role I'd earned. The final attempt came 6 weeks after that fateful dinner. Derek appeared at a charity gala I was catering. A prestigious event where I'd once hidden behind serving trays but now attended as a featured culinary artist. You look happy, he said, cornering me near the dessert display. The bitterness in his voice had faded, replaced by something approaching resignation. I am, I replied simply. I sold the ring, he offered after an awkward pause. Donated the money to a scholarship fund for culinary students. Thought you'd approve. The gesture surprised me, suggesting growth I hadn't expected. That's meaningful. Thank you. I've been thinking about what you said. About respect being fundamental. He glanced around the gala where servers circulated with trays of my creations. I never saw them before. The people behind the service. I'm trying to see now. It wasn't an apology exactly, but perhaps something more valuable. Evidence of reflection, the first step toward genuine change. That's a good place to start, I acknowledged, not unkindly. We didn't speak again that night or in the months that followed. Occasionally I'd hear updates through industry channels. Derek had changed firms, had moved to Chicago, was dating someone new. Each piece of information affected me less than the last, until they became merely facts about a person I once knew intimately but no longer needed to track. A year after our separation, a small package arrived at the restaurant. Inside lay a leather-bound journal I recognized as one I'd admired in a shop window during our early dating days. The note read simply, "You were right. Keep building your empire. It's impressive as hell. D." I donated the journal to our culinary mentorship program but kept the note, not out of lingering attachment, but as a reminder of the power in standing firmly in one's truth, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. Evelyn's expanded to 3 locations over the next few years. I maintained my Tuesday tradition of waiting tables, though the practice was now publicized as part of our philosophy rather than hidden. The corner booth, once reserved under my name for Derek's visits, became dedicated to a rotating program hosting culinary students, allowing them to experience fine dining many couldn't otherwise afford. On particularly busy evenings, when every table hums with conversation and every plate returns empty, I sometimes pause in a quiet corner to watch the dance of service unfold around me. In these moments, I'm grateful for the painful lesson Derek inadvertently taught me, that a life compartmentalized is a life diminished, that hiding pieces of ourselves for another's comfort only leads to our own confinement. The engagement ring he reclaimed that night has been replaced by something more meaningful. A simple band I purchased myself, engraved with my grandmother's favorite saying, "Serve with pride, lead with grace." It adorns my right hand, a daily reminder that I am whole and complete in myself, defined not by whom I love or who loves me, but by the integrity with which I move through the world. Some might see my story as one of revenge, of a calculated gotcha moment designed to humiliate. But I know differently. It was never about bringing Derek down. It was about finally, after too long, allowing myself to stand fully in my power, refusing to be diminished for someone else's comfort or pride. That's not revenge. It's reclamation. I spotted my husband at a rooftop bar, wrapped around my best friend. "You should be coaching our son's soccer game." I yelled. He just laughed. So I sent him divorce papers with a good luck cupcake, and a video of him crying at the bar. It went viral. He begged my sister to take him back on live stream. The cupcake was beautiful, chocolate with perfect buttercream swirls and "good luck" written in elegant red script. Dean's face when he opened the box alongside the divorce papers was even more beautiful. At least that's what Kate told me later. I wasn't there to witness it myself, but I could picture it clearly. His smug confidence crumbling as he realized what was happening. It had been exactly 8 days since I'd spotted him at that rooftop bar with Jessica, his arm wrapped around my best friend when he should have been coaching our son's championship soccer game. 8 days since he'd laughed in my face when I confronted him. 8 days of careful planning that led to this moment of perfect, sweet revenge. But let me back up to when my world first shattered. Every Wednesday afternoon followed the same routine. I'd rush from the Michaels home where I worked as a nanny to pick up my son Tyler for soccer practice. I'd mastered the art of folding laundry at lightning speed while keeping one eye on the clock. The twins' tiny socks and onesies formed perfect little squares under my practiced hands. This Wednesday was different though. It was the championship game and my husband Dean had promised to coach. His morning text still illuminated my phone screen. "Got the playbook ready. See you at the field." I traced my finger over those words, a flutter of hope rising in my chest. After 3 canceled parent-teacher conferences and countless missed soccer practices, Dean was finally stepping up for our son. "Mrs. Michaels doesn't need these clothes folded today," I whispered to myself, trying to quell my anxiety as the minute hand inched toward 3. Tyler had been practicing his penalty kicks every evening this week, his face lighting up when Dean actually showed up to help him 2 nights ago. "Dad says I'm going to score the winning goal," he told me, eyes shining with admiration for the father who'd become increasingly absent from his life. The kitchen clock showed 3:15 p.m. when Mrs. Michael returned early, catching me glancing nervously at the door for the fifth time in as many minutes. "Amanda, you should go. Tyler's big game, right?" Her voice carried that gentle understanding that always made me feel less alone in my struggles. She adjusted her designer watch, probably worth more than my monthly salary, and leaned against the marble countertop. "I still need to finish the twins' laundry and prepare their afternoon snacks," I protested weakly, even as my heart raced with the need to leave. "The twins and I can manage without perfectly folded onesies for one afternoon." She smiled, revealing the warmth that made working for her so different from my previous employers. "Championship games don't happen every day." I nodded gratefully, quickly gathering my purse while explaining that Dean would be coaching. "He's been practicing with Tyler all week," I said, believing my own words despite the history that should have taught me better. Mrs. Michael's smile tightened slightly. She'd heard about Dean's broken promises before, had witnessed my tearful phone calls on the days he failed to pick up Tyler when promised. Traffic crawled along Oak Avenue as I checked the time repeatedly. The digital numbers on my dashboard seemed to mock me as they changed from 3:25 to 3:26. My fingers drummed impatiently against the steering wheel, tapping out a rhythm of anxiety. Before leaving, Mrs. Michael had pressed an extra $20 into my palm. "Every championship needs proper celebration," she'd insisted when I tried to refuse. "Get those boys some snacks. They deserve it." I pulled into West Side Market, calculating that I had just enough time to grab juice boxes and orange slices before the game started at 4 o'clock. The automatic doors whispered open as I grabbed a shopping basket and rushed toward the produce section, mentally checking off items. 24 juice boxes for 12 sweaty fourth graders. 4 bags of pre-sliced oranges. Maybe those chocolate granola bars Tyler loved for after the game. That's when my phone rang, Tyler's school number lighting up the screen. My heart stuttered as I answered. "Mom." His voice sounded smaller than his 10 years. "Where's Dad? Coach Peterson is asking if anyone knows the plays since Dad's not here." My stomach dropped, the familiar weight of disappointment settling in my chest. "He's not there yet?" I asked, knowing the answer before the words left my mouth. "No." The single syllable carried all the hurt Dean had inflicted over years of broken promises. "Everyone's parents are here except mine." "I'll be there in 10 minutes, honey," I promised, abandoning the shopping cart in the middle of the aisle. The oranges and juice boxes suddenly seemed trivial compared to the crack I could hear forming in my son's heart. My mind raced with excuses for Dean as I hurried back to my car. Traffic, work emergency, flat tire. The same excuses I'd been making for him since Tyler was old enough to notice his father's absence. I'd become an expert at painting Dean as the victim of circumstances rather than choices, shielding Tyler from the truth that his father simply didn't prioritize him. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I realized I needed to take a different route to avoid the construction on Main Street. The digital sign at the intersection had been warning about it all week. Road closed. Detour ahead. The detour would take me past the Loft, that fancy new rooftop bar downtown where Dean claimed corporate executives always dragged him 4 mandatory, after-work drinks. He described it with such disdain, as if these networking events were torturous obligations rather than opportunities to escape family responsibilities. The red light at Jefferson and 5th seemed interminable as I sat fidgeting behind the wheel. From this intersection, I had a clear view of the Loft's outdoor patio 4 stories up. Despite the afternoon sun, I could make out the faces of patrons enjoying early happy hour, their carefree laughter carrying on the spring breeze. My breath caught in my throat as I spotted a familiar profile at one of the tables, Dean's distinctive gray blazer and the back of his head as he leaned in close to someone. The blazer I'd ironed just this morning. The blazer he'd put on while promising he wouldn't let Tyler down today. I squinted, sure I was mistaken, until he shifted slightly and revealed Jessica's unmistakable blonde hair cascading over her shoulders. My best friend since college, the woman who had stood beside me at my wedding, who had held Tyler hours after he was born, who had brought me soup when I had pneumonia last winter. Jessica, who had been texting me almost daily about her marital troubles with Brian, seeking my advice and sympathy. The light turned green, but I couldn't move as I watched her hand casually stroke my husband's arm, their faces inches apart in an intimacy that left no room for innocent explanation. A car honked behind me, the sound jarring me back to reality. I pressed the gas pedal mechanically, my vision blurring with tears I refused to shed. In that moment, as the loft receded in my rearview mirror, I felt something inside me crack and reform. The hurt was there, a white-hot pain that threatened to consume me, but beneath it bubbled something unfamiliar: rage. Not the fleeting anger I'd felt during our arguments about his absences, but something deeper and more resolute. Dean wasn't stuck in traffic. He wasn't dealing with a work emergency. He was exactly where he wanted to be, with exactly who he wanted to be with. And it wasn't with his son on the most important day of his 10-year-old soccer career. It wasn't with me. The truth settled over me like a sudden frost, cold and clarifying. As I drove toward Tyler's school, I made a silent promise to myself. This would be the last time Dean's choices would break our son's heart. The last time I would make excuses for his absence. The last time I would preserve his image at the cost of my dignity. I just didn't know yet how sweet that final reckoning would be. The steering wheel felt cold under my white-knuckled grip as I swerved into the nearest parking spot, tires screeching against the asphalt. My wedding ring clinked against the metal as my hands trembled. Looking up at the loft's sleek glass exterior, I felt a storm brewing inside me, rage and heartbreak colliding like thunderclouds. My body moved on autopilot while my mind screamed contradicting commands. Go to Tyler's game, confront Dean, call Jessica, just drive away and pretend I saw nothing. Each option played out in rapid succession behind my eyes, none of them leaving me unscathed. The logical part of me knew Tyler needed a parent at his game. The wounded part needed answers. The wounded part won. I barely remembered locking my car or crossing the street. The building's revolving door spun me into a marble lobby where a security guard nodded as I strode toward the elevator bank. My reflection in the polished doors showed a woman I hardly recognized, cheeks flushed, eyes burning with a fire I'd never seen in myself before. The elevator ride to the rooftop seemed eternal. Each floor's soft ding marked another moment where my life as I knew it was ending. 5th floor. The Christmas when Dean had given Tyler a baseball glove, despite his passion for soccer. 6th floor. Jessica holding my hand through my miscarriage 3 years ago, promising she'd always be there for me. 7th floor. Our wedding day, Dean vowing to cherish me forever. 8th floor. The rooftop bar where those promises were currently turning to ash. When the doors finally opened, the cheerful hostess asked if I had a reservation. Her perfect smile faltered as she took in my expression. I'm meeting my husband, I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Name? She asked, glancing down at her tablet. He's already here. With a blonde woman. The words tasted bitter like copper pennies on my tongue. Oh. You must mean Mr. Reynolds and Ms. Carter? Corner table. She gestured toward the patio. Would you like me to? I was already moving past her, scanning the outdoor space until I spotted them at a corner table partially hidden by decorative palm plants. The afternoon sun highlighted Jessica's honey blonde hair I'd helped her select highlights for just last month. Dean's hand rested casually on the small of her back, his thumb making small circles on the red fabric of her dress. My dress. The one she'd borrowed last week for a client dinner. They didn't notice me approaching. Jessica was laughing at something Dean said, her hand resting comfortably on his thigh. My husband, the same man who claimed he was too busy to attend a single parent-teacher conference this year, was casually swirling an expensive-looking cocktail while our son waited for him on a soccer field across town. I stood there for perhaps 10 seconds, memorizing the tableau of betrayal. The intimate lean of their bodies toward each other. The lipstick mark on Dean's collar. The familiarity in how Jessica's fingers played with his watch band. A birthday gift from me he'd claimed to love. Well, isn't this cozy? My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, higher, shakier than intended. They jumped apart like guilty teenagers, Dean's drink sloshing over the rim of his glass onto the pristine white tablecloth. Jessica's face drained of color so quickly I thought she might faint. Dean recovered faster, his expression shifting from shock to irritation with practiced ease. Amanda, he said flatly as if I were an unexpected bill in the mail. What are you doing here? The absurdity of his question ignited something volatile within me. You should be coaching our son's soccer game. The words burst from me, loud enough that nearby tables fell silent, cocktail glasses pausing midway to lips as heads turned in our direction. It's the championship, Dean. You promised him. Dean's face registered shock, then annoyance at the public scene I was creating. Jessica at least had the decency to look ashamed, her eyes dropping to the table where her manicured nails, the same coral shade I'd complimented last week, nervously shredded a cocktail napkin. Amanda, calm down, Dean hissed, glancing nervously at the other patrons. You're making a scene. I can explain. But then he did something I'll never forget. He laughed. A short, dismissive chuckle that conveyed exactly how little my feelings and Tyler's disappointment meant to him. It's just a kid's game, Amanda. Peterson can handle it. Just a kid's game. Just our son's heart breaking as he scanned the sidelines for his father. Just another promise casually discarded because someone, more interesting came along. Just a game. I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet now. Tyler has been practicing those plays with you all week. He was counting on you. Dean sighed dramatically as if my concerns were tedious. I'll make it up to him. We'll go fishing this weekend or something. Jessica attempted damage control, sliding away from Dean, her hands fluttering like nervous birds. Amanda, we were just discussing the Johnson account. Dean mentioned he had to cancel on Tyler, and I was just comforting him because he felt terrible about it. Her words trailed off under my stare, the lie too flimsy to sustain itself. The Johnson account, I echoed. Strange. That's the same excuse you both used last Friday. And the Thursday before that. And at Jessica's birthday dinner that Brian couldn't attend. I turned my gaze to her. How is Brian, by the way? Still working nights at the hospital while you comfort my husband. Jessica flinched as if I'd slapped her. Dean's jaw tightened, the muscle twitching beneath his 5 o'clock shadow. This is ridiculous, he muttered, checking his watch impatiently, the watch I'd saved for 6 months to buy him. You're being dramatic. How long? I asked, my voice steadier now, fueled by a strange calm that had settled over me. When neither answered, I knew. Months? Years. Their silence was confirmation enough. The realization that I'd been played for a fool by the two people I trusted most hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been picking up extra nanny shifts to afford Tyler's soccer camp, they'd been meeting for afternoon trysts. While I'd been consoling Jessica through her marriage troubles, she'd been sleeping with my husband. I need to get to Tyler's game, I finally said, surprising myself with the calmness in my voice. Dean rolled his eyes. You're overreacting. I'll make it up to him this weekend. Jessica reached for my arm, but I jerked away from her touch as if she were contagious. Amanda, please, we need to talk about this like adults. Don't you dare show up at my house again, I told her before turning to Dean. And don't bother coming home tonight. Dean's face darkened. It's my house too. Then I'll be the one not coming home, I replied, already planning to call Kate. Either way, I don't want to see you. As I walked away, head high despite the curious stares from neighboring tables, I heard Dean's angry whisper. See what you've done? Now I have to deal with this drama all night. Their laughter followed me to the elevator. Quieter this time, conspiratorial. They were already moving on, already dismissing me and the scene I'd caused. The hostess avoided my eyes as I passed, her discomfort palpable. Inside the elevator, I watched the numbers count down, feeling oddly disconnected from my body. My reflection in the polished doors showed the same woman who'd ridden up minutes before, yet everything had changed. Something had broken inside me, something that couldn't be fixed with Dean's empty promises or Jessica's fake apologies. As the doors opened to the lobby, I took a deep breath and stepped out. Tyler was waiting, and unlike his father, I wouldn't let him down. But as I walked toward my car, a new resolve crystallized within me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Dean's laughter echoed in my mind, fueling something I hadn't felt in years. A fierce determination to reclaim my dignity, whatever it took. The soccer field came into view as I turned into the school parking lot. Parents lined the sidelines in folding chairs, cheering enthusiastically. I was 20 minutes late. The scoreboard showed 0-1 with the opposing team leading. My heart sank as I scanned the field for Tyler's number 14 jersey, finally spotting him defending near the goal, his small shoulders tense with concentration. I slipped onto the metal bleachers beside another mother who nodded sympathetically. You haven't missed much, she whispered. Though Coach Peterson seems a bit lost today. Coach Peterson paced the sidelines, consulting a crumpled piece of paper. Likely the standard plays he'd been using all season. Nothing like the specialized strategy Dean and Tyler had developed together during those rare evenings when my husband actually showed up for practice. I cheered loudly when Tyler blocked a shot, waving when he glanced toward the stands. His face brightened momentarily before his eyes continued searching, looking past me for the father who wouldn't be coming. The disappointment that flashed across his features cut deeper than any betrayal Dean had inflicted on me. Tyler's team lost the championship game 1-3. The boys huddled together afterward, their young faces a mix of disappointment and resilience as Coach Peterson offered words of encouragement. I waited near the bench, watching Tyler accept his participation trophy with a polite "thank you" that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom." He jogged over, his cleats crunching on gravel. "Did you see my block in the second quarter?" "I did," I said, pulling him into a hug that he only half resisted. "You were amazing out there." His eyes darted past me again. "Dad never came, huh?" "No, honey. He didn't." On the drive home, Tyler stared out the window, his participation trophy forgotten on the backseat where he'd tossed it without ceremony. His profile, so much like Dean's, was silhouetted against the gathering dusk, streetlights illuminating his features in rhythmic flashes. "Dad had an important work thing, huh?" he asked, not looking at me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, the memory of Dean and Jessica laughing together still fresh in my mind. My throat constricted around the automatic excuse I'd always provided. For the first time, I didn't make excuses for his father. "No, honey. Dad made a bad choice today." Tyler nodded slowly, understanding more than a 10-year-old should have to. "Like when he promised to come to my science fair but went golfing instead?" The question stunned me. "You knew about that?" Mitch's dad saw him at the country club. He shrugged with practiced indifference that broke my heart. "It's okay. I got second place anyway." We stopped for drive-through burgers, a rare treat on our tight budget. Tyler perked up slightly when I added a chocolate milkshake to the order. "Championship dinner," I declared, forcing brightness into my voice. "You played like a champion today." At home, I helped Tyler with his shower, checked his homework folder and tucked him into bed earlier than usual. He was emotionally exhausted, falling asleep midway through our nightly reading routine. I sat beside his bed for a few extra minutes, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest, the way his eyelashes cast tiny shadows on his cheeks. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though he couldn't hear me. Sorry that his father couldn't see the extraordinary child before him. Sorry that I'd spent years making excuses for a man who didn't deserve them. That night, after tucking Tyler into bed, I sat at our small kitchen table with a legal pad. Dean hadn't come home, hadn't even called to check on Tyler. His betrayal with Jessica hurt deeply, but it was his laughter, that casual dismissal of our son's disappointment, that hardened something inside me. I began making lists in neat, precise columns. Our joint checking account with its meager balance. The savings account Dean had borrowed from 3 times this year for business investments that never materialized. The modest savings bonds Tyler's grandparents had established for his college education. The small life insurance policy my parents had gifted us when Tyler was born. Our rental agreement with its clause about early termination. We didn't own much, but what we had built together, I had mostly paid for with my multiple nanny jobs over the years while Dean chased one failed career opportunity after another. His current position at Reynolds Marketing, a company whose name conveniently matched our surname, though no relation existed, was his longest employment stint at 18 months. I created a separate page for monthly expenses: rent, utilities, car payment, groceries, Tyler's after-school activities, medical insurance. The numbers told a stark story. Without Dean's income we would struggle, but we could survive. I'd been carrying most of the financial burden anyway, picking up weekend babysitting gigs and holiday house sitting to compensate for Dean's inconsistent contributions. My phone buzzed just before midnight. Kate's familiar face lit up the screen, her timing uncanny as always. My younger sister had a sixth sense for trouble. "Tyler texted me about missing Dad at his game," she said without preamble. "Everything okay?" I hadn't planned to tell anyone yet, but the words poured out: the rooftop bar, Jessica, Dean's laughter. Kate's swift intake of breath punctuated my story, her outrage on my behalf feeling like the first warm thing I'd experienced since the afternoon. "That absolute," she caught herself, mindful of Tyler sleeping down the hall. "I knew something was off with him lately, but Jessica? You're Jessica? The godmother to Tyler?" "The very same," I confirmed, the betrayal still raw. "Come stay with me," she offered immediately, already in problem-solving mode. My spare room is a disaster, but I can clear it out tomorrow. Tyler can take the sofa bed. I declined, explaining that I didn't want to disrupt Tyler's routine any more than necessary. He still has school tomorrow and I still have work. Plus, this is his home. I won't be the one to uproot him. Kate grew quiet before asking what I planned to do. The legal pad in front of me now had a different list. Divorce lawyer recommendations from an online search. 3 names were circled, with Patricia Sanderson, known for her fair but fierce representation of mothers, starred twice. I'm getting a divorce, I said, the words strange yet liberating on my tongue. Good, Kate said firmly. And then what? Then I rebuilt. For Tyler. For me. Thursday and Friday passed in a strange fog. Dean came home late Thursday night, his key scraping in the lock around 2 a.m. I lay awake, listening to him stumble around the living room before collapsing on the couch without speaking to me. He left before dawn on Friday, taking a change of clothes in his gym bag, the front door closing with exaggerated quietness. At breakfast, Tyler pushed his cereal around the bowl. Is Dad mad at us? No, honey, I assured him, smoothing his cowlick. Dad's just working through some stuff. Will we still go fishing on Saturday? He asked, eyes hopeful. Dad promised to teach me how to use the new lures Grandpa gave me. I watched my son's face fall when I admitted I didn't know. How about we plan something fun, just you and me as a backup? Maybe that new superhero movie. At work, Mrs. Michael noticed my distraction as I mechanically folded laundry and prepared the twins' lunch. One of the babies had spilled applesauce that I'd failed to clean up, and I'd nearly put salt instead of sugar in their oatmeal. Bad week? She asked gently, intercepting my hand as I reached for the wrong ingredient again. Something about her kindness broke through my carefully constructed wall. My husband's having an affair with my best friend, I blurted out, immediately regretting my unprofessional disclosure. To my surprise, she sat down at her kitchen island and simply asked, "What do you need?" What? The question caught me off guard. Time off? Different hours? A good attorney? What do you need, Amanda? Her directness was refreshing after 2 days of emotional limbo. I don't know yet, I admitted, tears threatening for the first time since the loft. Well, figure it out, she said, not unkindly. Then tell me. I've been where you are and I didn't have anyone asking me that question. It would have helped. By Friday evening I had secured an appointment with Patricia Sanderson for Monday morning, temporarily frozen our joint checking account, leaving enough for bills, and arranged for Tyler to spend Saturday with my parents under the guise of helping Grandpa with his garden. Dean finally called around dinner time, not to check on Tyler but to inform me he'd be working late again. The thinly veiled lie ignited a quiet fury inside me. Mrs. Michael's question, "What do you need?" kept echoing in my mind as I tucked Tyler into bed that night. What I needed was for Dean to face real consequences, not just from me, but in a way that matched his public humiliation of our family. Dean had always been obsessed with appearances, with being respected and admired. The man who coordinated his ties with his pocket squares cared deeply about his image. As I smoothed Tyler's blanket, an idea began to form, something fitting for a man who valued his public image more than his son's heart. Something that would make him feel as exposed and betrayed as we had felt watching him laugh at that rooftop bar. For the first time in days, I smiled. A small, determined curve of my lips that held no warmth but promised resolution. Dean had taught me an important lesson about the man he truly was. Now it was time to show him exactly who I had become. The weekend passed in a blur of forced normalcy for Tyler's sake. Dean texted Saturday morning to cancel the fishing trip, citing unavoidable client meetings. I watched Tyler absorb the news with practiced stoicism as he packed his overnight bag for Grandpa's instead. His small shoulders squared with resilience that both broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. Monday morning arrived with a strange sense of clarity. The fog of betrayal had lifted, revealing a path forward illuminated by purpose rather than anger. I dropped Tyler at school with an extra tight hug. "What's that for?" he asked, already glancing toward his friends waiting by the playground. "Just because I love you," I replied, smoothing his cowlick one last time. "Have a good day, sweetheart." "You too, Mom," he called, already running toward the basketball court. I drove directly to the law offices of Patricia Sanderson, located in a modest brick building downtown. The waiting room smelled of lemon polish and fresh coffee. A framed needlepoint on the wall read, "Well-behaved women rarely make history." I took it as a good sign. Miss Sanderson was nothing like I'd imagined. I'd expected someone severe and intimidating, but she was a petite woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. Her handshake, however, communicated strength and confidence. "So," she said once we were seated in her office, "you want a divorce?" "Yes," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "As quickly and cleanly as possible." The divorce papers were straightforward. We had little property to divide, and I wanted full custody with reasonable visitation for Dean, provided he actually showed up. Miss Sanderson nodded approvingly as I outlined my financial situation and Tyler's needs. "And the father's relationship with your son?" she asked, making notes in elegant handwriting. "Inconsistent at best," I admitted. "He loves Tyler, but on his own terms and timeline. My son deserves better than conditional affection." When I explained my specific request for how the papers should be delivered, Miss Sanderson raised an eyebrow but didn't refuse. "It's unusual," she admitted, "but not illegal. We typically use a standard process server, but there's no law against including additional items with the papers." A hint of amusement crossed her features. "I've seen worse in 25 years of family law. Much worse." I left her office feeling lighter than I had in years, as if I'd set down a boulder I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. The spring air felt fresher, colors more vibrant. I checked my watch. Still an hour before I needed to be at the Michaels. On impulse, I turned toward Maple Street, stopping at Sweet Sensations Bakery. The bell above the door chimed merrily as I entered the small shop. Glass cases displayed artful confections in every color imaginable. The aroma of vanilla and sugar enveloped me like a warm embrace. "Amanda." Mrs. Rodriguez emerged from behind the counter, her round face lighting up with recognition. "It's been too long. How's that handsome boy of yours?" The bakery owner was a mother whose children I had occasionally watched years ago, before landing the steadier position with the Michaels. Her twins were in high school now, her oldest in college. "Tyler's doing well," I said, then hesitated before adding, "but I'm getting divorced." Her expression shifted immediately to understanding. When I explained what I needed, her eyes softened with compassion. "I divorced Mr. Rodriguez 20 years ago when I caught him with my cousin," she confided, leaning across the counter conspiratorially. "Never regretted it for a minute. Best decision I ever made besides opening this bakery." She showed me their selection of single cupcakes, each elaborately decorated with handcrafted fondant designs. Wedding cupcakes with delicate sugar flowers. Birthday cupcakes topped with miniature balloons. Anniversary cupcakes with intertwined hearts. "Nothing for divorce yet," she joked, "though maybe there should be." I selected a chocolate one with buttercream frosting, requesting "good luck" written in elegant script across the top. Mrs. Rodriguez led me to a small table near the window where we could discuss the design. She sketched several options on a notepad, her artistic talent evident in the quick strokes. "This one," I decided, pointing to a design that balanced elegance with subtle irony, exactly the tone I wanted to strike. Mrs. Rodriguez worked carefully, adding small decorative touches around the edges, tiny buttercream stars and a delicate chocolate drizzle. Her hands moved with practiced precision as she piped the message in perfect cursive. "On the house," she insisted when I tried to pay. "Consider it a donation to the cause of women everywhere." I hugged her impulsively, this woman I barely knew who had become an unexpected ally in my moment of need. "You're doing the right thing," she whispered. "Stay strong." Wednesday afternoon found me unusually nervous as I watched the Michaels twins. I checked my phone constantly, waiting for confirmation that everything was in place. The cupcake waited in Mrs. Rodriguez's refrigerator. The papers were prepared in Miss Sanderson's office. All the pieces were aligned. Mrs. Michael noticed my frequent glances at the clock and shooed me out early again. "Go handle your business," she said with a knowing smile. I'd confided my plan to her over a glass of wine the evening before, after the twins were asleep. She'd not only approved but offered to keep Tyler overnight if necessary. "Every woman deserves at least one moment of poetic justice," she told me, refilling my glass. "And some men deserve a reckoning." I drove to the loft, parking across the street with a clear view of the entrance. My heart pounded in my chest, Not from anxiety but from anticipation. At exactly 5:30 p.m. as predicted, Dean and Jessica arrived together, his arm casually draped around her waist as they entered the building. So predictable, these secret rendezvous that weren't so secret anymore. Same place, same time, same betrayal repackaged as something special. I wondered if he ordered the same overpriced cocktail for her that he'd been drinking when I confronted them. The small digital camera in my purse had been a Christmas gift from Dean 2 years ago. For taking better pictures of Tyler's games, he'd said, though he rarely attended them himself. Now it would serve a different purpose. I waited 30 minutes before entering the bar, giving them time to settle into their routine of intimate touches and false security. The hostess recognized me but said nothing as I declined her offer to be seated, instead heading directly to the bar. From my stool I had a perfect view of their corner table. I kept my distance, ordering a soda while surreptitiously filming their intimate behavior. Dean's hand on her knee. Jessica's fingers playing with his collar. Their heads close together as they laughed at some private joke. I positioned the camera discreetly, capturing several minutes of their interactions. Nothing explicit. I wasn't looking to create scandal porn. Just clear evidence of an ongoing affair rather than a one-time indiscretion. Evidence that couldn't be explained away as just discussing the Johnson account. When Dean excused himself to use the restroom, I seized the opportunity. Moving quickly through the happy hour crowd, I approached their table. Jessica's eyes widened in alarm as she recognized me. Amanda. Enjoy him while it lasts, I said quietly, causing her to nearly spill her wine. What are you doing here? She hissed, glancing nervously toward the restrooms. I smiled coldly. Gathering evidence. Did you know Dean's been texting my sister Kate too? The lie slid out easily and I watched doubt flicker across Jessica's face. Affairs built on betrayal carried their own seeds of destruction. The constant fear that your partner would do to you exactly what they'd done with you. You're lying, she whispered, but uncertainty clouded her eyes. Why would I? I replied with a shrug. Just thought you should know what you're getting. Good luck with that. I walked away before Dean could return, slipping out through the patio exit and back to my car. Mission accomplished. The last piece of my plan was in place. The delivery was scheduled for Thursday at 3 p.m., when Dean would be meeting with his biggest client. Ms. Sanderson had confirmed the timing, and Mrs. Rodriguez personally boxed the cupcake that morning, adding a small note card with the bakery's logo. A touch of professionalism for what was, in essence, an act of glorious pettiness. I couldn't be there to witness it, but Kate could. My sister positioned herself at a cafe across from Dean's office building, texting me updates as I tried to focus on the Michaels twins. Delivery person just went in. Dean's coming out to reception. He's opening the box. Oh my God, his face. Then came the photo. Dean standing in his office doorway, divorce papers in one hand, cupcake box in the other, his expression a mixture of shock and embarrassment as colleagues peered curiously from their cubicles. His perfectly curated professional image crumbling in real time. Along with the papers and cupcake, I'd included a thumb drive containing selected footage from the loft. Nothing explicit, just enough to show his betrayal wasn't a one-time mistake, just enough to make it clear I wouldn't be gaslighted or manipulated into forgiveness. Kate's final text simply read, "Mission accomplished. He looks destroyed." I stared at the message, expecting to feel triumph or at least satisfaction. Instead, I felt something quieter but more profound. Peace. For the first time since spotting them at that rooftop bar, I felt the ground steady beneath my feet. The twins were napping, the house quiet except for the gentle hum of the dishwasher. I sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through the photos Kate had sent, studying Dean's face as he realized his carefully constructed world was collapsing. In that moment of public unraveling, he looked so small, so ordinary. Nothing like the man who had once seemed to fill every room with his presence. Mrs. Michael found me there, smiling at my phone. "It's done?" she asked, setting a cup of tea before me. I nodded, showing her the photo. She examined it, her lips curving into a satisfied smile. "The cupcake was a nice touch," she said. "Elegant. With just the right amount of pettiness," I added, and we both laughed. A free, unburdened sound that echoed through the sunlit kitchen. The twins woke from their nap an hour later, demanding snacks and stories. I moved through the afternoon routine with mechanical efficiency, my mind still processing the image of Dean's shocked face. Mrs. Michaels squeezed my shoulder supportively before leaving to pick up her older children from school. Remember, Tyler can stay overnight if you need space, she reminded me. I arrived home to an empty apartment, grateful for the hour of solitude before picking up Tyler from his after-school program. I kicked off my shoes, made tea, and sank onto the couch, savoring the quietness. The vibration of my phone shattered the peace. Dean's calls started that evening, 15 in 2 hours, each voicemail more desperate than the last. The first came while I was stirring pasta for Tyler's dinner. "Amanda, call me back. This isn't funny. We need to talk about whatever stunt you're pulling." The second arrived as Tyler was telling me about his science project. "Amanda, seriously? Divorce papers? With a cupcake? People at work are talking. Call me." By the third, the anger had given way to panic. "Please just call me. I can explain everything with Jessica. It's not what you think." I listened to the first few messages, hearing his voice crack as he begged me to call him back, to let him explain. By the fifth message he was crying, something I hadn't seen him do since Tyler was born. The raw vulnerability in his voice was startling after years of his emotional distance. "I don't want to lose you and Tyler," he sobbed into my voicemail. "Please, Amanda. I messed up. I know I messed up." I saved that particular voicemail, not out of cruelty but as confirmation that the wall of indifference he'd built around himself could actually be penetrated. For years I'd wondered if anything could break through his carefully maintained facade. Now I knew. Tyler asked about the calls during dinner, his young face worried as my phone vibrated for the 12th time. The sound seemed to punctuate our meal with anxiety. "Is that Dad? Why do you keep ignoring it?" I set down my fork, considering my words carefully. "Dad's upset about some grown-up stuff," I explained, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "But it doesn't change how much we both love you." Tyler nodded solemnly. "Is he coming home tonight?" "No, sweetie. Not tonight." After tucking Tyler into bed, I blocked Dean's number, giving myself permission to focus solely on my son's needs. The instant relief was palpable, like finally setting down a heavy suitcase I'd been carrying too long. That night I slept deeply for the first time in a week, dreamless and uninterrupted. Friday morning dawned clear and crisp. Tyler seemed lighter at breakfast, chattering about the class field trip to the Science Museum while I packed his lunch. I dropped him at school with our new goodbye ritual, 3 quick squeezes of his hand that meant, "I love you." At the Michaels house, the twins were fussy with emerging teeth, requiring extra comfort and distraction. I was kneeling on the playroom floor, demonstrating how to stack blocks for the 20th time, when Mrs. Michael appeared in the doorway, her expression cautious. "Amanda, Jessica is at the door. She's asking to speak with you." My stomach dropped. "I don't have anything to say to her." "That's what I told her." Mrs. Michael's voice carried a protective edge. "But she's insistent. Would you like me to send her away again?" I considered for a moment, then shook my head. "No, I'll handle the twins. You can tell her I'm busy." From the nursery window I watched their exchange. Mrs. Michael stood in the doorway, her posture unyielding. "Amanda's busy with the children," I heard her say firmly. "And you need to leave." Jessica's shoulders slumped in defeat as she nodded, turning back toward her silver Audi, a recent upgrade she'd shown off last month, attributing it to a bonus that I now realized probably came from Brian's surgeon salary. Her designer sunglasses couldn't hide the puffiness around her eyes as she slid into the driver's seat. I felt a confusing mixture of satisfaction and sadness watching my former best friend retreat. 15 years of friendship dissolved by her choices. Birthday celebrations, college road trips, being her maid of honor, her standing as Tyler's godmother. All meaningless now. Later, Mrs. Michael handed me an envelope. "She left this for you." Inside was a handwritten letter on Jessica's monogrammed stationery, the set I'd given her last Christmas. The elegant cursive was marred by tear stains and crossed-out words. The letter was full of apologies and excuses. They'd been unhappy for years, it just happened she'd felt overlooked by her own husband. The words blurred before my eyes, each sentence more self-serving than the last. The letter ended with a plea. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please don't tell Brian." Her concern for her own marriage after helping destroy mine struck me as the final betrayal. I shredded the letter before leaving work, watching the pieces flutter into the recycling bin like confetti. The weekend provided a welcome respite as Tyler and I established new routines without Dean's sporadic presence. Saturday morning we made pancakes shaped like soccer balls. A messy experiment that left batter spatters on the ceiling but Tyler giggling uncontrollably. "Mom, yours looks more like a deflated basketball," he laughed, pointing at my misshapen creation. "Well, yours looks like Australia," I countered, prompting an impromptu geography lesson over breakfast. We visited the library, filling our canvas bag with books about space exploration, Tyler's current obsession. The children's librarian, Ms. Patel, recommended a cookbook with kid-friendly recipes when Tyler mentioned our pancake adventure. "This has a recipe for pizza dough you can shape into anything," she whispered conspiratorially. "Much more forgiving than pancake batter." Back home, we started planning a small vegetable garden in the containers on our apartment balcony, marking spaces for cherry tomatoes, basil, and the sugar snap peas Tyler insisted would grow all the way to the sky like Jack's beanstalk. Tyler asked fewer questions about his father's absence than I'd expected, perhaps because Dean's presence had always been inconsistent. Instead, he seemed to flourish in the predictability of our new routine, helping create our weekend schedule on a colorful chart that now hung on the refrigerator. On Sunday afternoon, while Tyler played with neighborhood friends in the apartment complex playground, I sat on a bench watching them race up and down the slide. The spring sunshine felt warm on my face, a reminder that life continued to move forward despite the seismic shifts in our family structure. My phone rang, Kate's familiar ringtone breaking into my thoughts. "Dean showed up at my apartment this morning," she said without preamble, her voice a mixture of amusement and disbelief. "He was crying, Amanda. Actually sobbing in my hallway." I sat up straighter, glancing toward Tyler to ensure he was still happily playing. "What? Why your place?" According to Kate, Dean had confused her apartment with mine, a mistake that seemed impossible given that Kate lived across town in a completely different building, in a high-rise with a doorman and security system unlike our garden apartment complex. "He thought I was you at first," she explained. "Started this whole speech about making amends and being a better man. Then he registered my pajamas and pink hair and realized his mistake." "What did he want?" I asked, watching Tyler coordinate an elaborate game involving the monkey bars and what appeared to be an invisible enemy. When he realized his error, he became even more distraught, begging me to intervene on his behalf. It was honestly pathetic, Amanda. He said he's been sleeping in his car because Jessica's husband found out and threatened him. I gasped despite myself. "Brian knows. Apparently your cupcake delivery inspired Brian to send Jessica divorce papers too, with a whole box of cupcakes. 6 of them, all with different messages. Sweet Sensations is doing brisk business in divorce cupcakes this week." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I felt a surprised laugh bubble up from somewhere deep inside me. "I shouldn't laugh," I said, though I couldn't stop the smile spreading across my face. "You absolutely should," Kate insisted. "It's poetic justice of the highest order." She explained that she'd finally told Dean to leave, promising nothing except to let me know he was looking for me. He looked terrible, by the way. Unshaven, same clothes as yesterday. A far cry from his usual polished self. Monday morning brought my second meeting with Ms. Sanderson, who confirmed that Dean had been served properly and the divorce proceedings were officially underway. "He called our office 16 times on Friday," she reported with professional detachment, flipping through a notepad. My assistant explained that all communication should go through legal channels now. As I left her office, I felt an unexpected lightness. The anger that had fueled my revenge had burned itself out, leaving behind a calm determination to build something better for Tyler and myself. On impulse, I stopped by the community college on my way to work, picking up brochures about their early childhood education program. Mrs. Michael had mentioned that the preschool where her sister worked was looking for assistant teachers, positions that came with tuition assistance. Standing in the sunlit campus courtyard, watching students hurry between classes with purposeful expressions, I allowed myself to imagine possibilities that had seemed unthinkable just weeks ago. For the first time in years, I pictured a future shaped by my own choices rather than Dean's broken promises. A future where Tyler and I thrived not despite his father's absence, but because we had finally stopped waiting for him to show up. The community college brochure became my roadmap in the weeks that followed. I filled out the application that evening at the kitchen table, Tyler coloring beside me, occasionally peering over to ask what different words meant. Matriculation, prerequisite, accreditation. Each term represented a step toward the future I was building for us. 2 months passed with surprising swiftness. Spring turned to early summer, bringing longer days filled with possibility. The divorce proceedings moved forward with unexpected smoothness, Dean offering little resistance to my requests for custody arrangements and asset division. Miss Sanderson seemed almost disappointed by the lack of drama. Most clients would be thrilled with such a straightforward case, she remarked during our May meeting, but I have to admit, I was looking forward to using some of my more creative legal strategies. Tyler finished 4th grade with improved grades and a renewed interest in soccer. His final report card showed remarkable progress in mathematics and reading, subjects he'd struggled with earlier in the year when Dean's empty promises had left him distracted and anxious. Ms. Rivera says I might qualify for the advanced reading group next year, he announced proudly, placing his report card on the refrigerator next to our weekend activity chart. Dean eventually stopped trying to contact me directly, the stream of desperate voicemails and text messages drying up after Ms. Sanderson sent a firmly worded letter about harassment. Instead, he began following the court-mandated communication channels regarding visitation with Tyler, sending formal emails that read like business correspondence rather than co-parenting discussions. His first supervised visit was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon at the Family Center downtown, a neutral location where trained social workers observed parent-child interactions. I dreaded the drop-off, uncertain how Tyler would respond to seeing his father after weeks of separation. What if Dad doesn't remember the new handshake I made up? Tyler asked as we drove downtown, his small fingers fidgeting with his seat belt. Then you'll teach it to him again, I reassured him, though internally I questioned whether Dean would even notice such details. When we arrived at the center, Dean was already waiting in the lobby, dressed in pressed khakis and a blue button-down that made him look like he was heading to a job interview rather than meeting his son. Something about his posture had changed, the confident swagger replaced by a wary hesitance that made him seem smaller somehow. I exchanged minimal pleasantries with the social worker before hugging Tyler and promising to return in 2 hours. As I walked away, I glanced back to see Dean kneeling to Tyler's height, his expression more attentive than I'd seen in years. Dad cried when I told him about scoring the winning goal in our last game, Tyler reported afterward, seeming confused but somewhat pleased by his father's emotional response as we drove home. And he knew all the players on my team, even though he's only been to 1 game. I simply nodded, keeping my opinions about Dean's newfound attentiveness to myself. Tyler didn't need my skepticism or bitterness. He needed space to rebuild whatever relationship with his father was possible now. Our apartment felt different after I rearranged the furniture and replaced Dean's oversized leather recliner, the one he'd insisted on buying despite its ridiculous scale, in our small living room, with a compact desk where I could study. The space felt airier, more intentionally designed rather than a collection of compromises. 3 nights a week after putting Tyler to bed, I spread my textbooks across that desk, working through assignments for my first community college courses. Early childhood development, introduction to psychology, and English composition filled my evenings with intellectual challenges that had nothing to do with navigating Dean's moods or making excuses for his absences. Mrs. Michael had not only recommended me for the assistant teaching position at Sunshine Preschool but also adjusted my nanny schedule to accommodate my Tuesday and Thursday morning classes. Investing in yourself is never wasted effort, she told me when I thanked her, passing me a cup of coffee in her kitchen one morning. Besides, the twins adore you. They can share you with some preschoolers for a few hours a week. The divorce would be finalized in another month, according to Ms. Sanderson, who seemed pleased with the straightforward proceedings. We'll have you officially single by Independence Day, she joked during our last meeting. Seems fitting. Kate invited us for Sunday dinners, creating a new tradition that gave Tyler something stable to anticipate each week. My sister's apartment, a quirky 3rd-floor walk-up filled with thrift store treasures and art from her travels, became our weekend sanctuary. Tyler loved helping her boyfriend, Marcus, grill vegetables on the tiny balcony while Kate and I prepared the rest of the meal in her kitchen. During one such dinner in early June, while Tyler and Marcus were engrossed in a competitive round of video game racing, Kate broached a subject I'd been avoiding. "Have you heard about Jessica?" she asked tentatively, refilling our wine glasses. I shook my head, genuinely unconcerned about my former friend's whereabouts. The space she'd once occupied in my life had closed up like water after a stone passes through, leaving no trace. Brian took the kids to his parents' place in Arizona, Kate continued, tucking her pink-tinged hair behind her ear. Jessica's still here trying to save face. I nodded, unsurprised that Brian would prioritize protecting their children from gossip. As a pediatric surgeon, he'd always demonstrated more parental responsibility than either Dean or Jessica. Kate studied me carefully over the rim of her glass. She asked about you at the grocery store yesterday. Wanted to know if you'd ever consider talking to her again. The question hung between us, unexpected and complicated. The anger I'd once felt toward Jessica had faded to something more like pity, though I wasn't ready to examine that shift too closely. Maybe someday, I finally answered. But not anytime soon. The neighborhood block party in late June brought an unexpected confrontation. The tenant association had transformed our apartment complex's central courtyard into a festive space with food stands, games, and activity stations. I volunteered at the children's face painting station, discovering an unexpected talent for creating miniature masterpieces on eager small faces. I was finishing a particularly elaborate butterfly design on a little girl's cheek when I sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Looking up, I spotted Dean standing awkwardly near the basketball court, wearing jeans and a plain gray t-shirt that hung loosely on his frame. He looked thinner and less confident than I remembered, almost uncertain of his right to be there despite living in the complex until recently. He kept his distance but watched Tyler playing basketball with friends, his expression unreadable from where I sat. When our son spotted him and ran over for an awkward hug, I saw genuine emotion in Dean's expression, a flash of vulnerability that would have been unthinkable months ago. I returned to my face painting, determined to give them space for whatever conversation they needed to have. An hour later, as I packed up our supplies, washing brushes and organizing paint pots, Dean approached cautiously, maintaining a respectful distance. "You look good, Amanda," he said, his voice lacking its former arrogance. The compliment contained no hint of the flirtatious entitlement that had once characterized his interactions with me. "Thanks," I replied, continuing my cleanup. "How are you settling into the new place?" "It's fine. Close to work." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I hear you're taking classes." I nodded, surprised he knew. "Early childhood education. Mrs. Michael's sister is my instructor, actually," I explained, keeping my tone neutral. Dean seemed to struggle with what to say next, his fingers tapping an anxious rhythm against his leg. Finally, he simply offered, "I'm proud of you," before walking away. The words felt strange coming from him, sincere but irrelevant, like praise from a distant acquaintance rather than the man I'd once built my life around. I realized with some surprise that his opinion, once so crucially important to my sense of self-worth, now carried no more weight than a casual comment from a neighbor. By July, Tyler and I had settled into routines that no longer centered around accommodating Dean's unpredictable schedule. We ate dinner at our small kitchen table instead of in front of the TV, started a book club where we took turns reading chapters to each other, and spent Saturday mornings volunteering at the community garden where Tyler had become the unofficial expert on tomato plants. The divorce became final on July 3rd, marked not with celebration but with a quiet acknowledgement. I treated myself to a haircut, something shorter and more modern than I'd ever dared try during my marriage, and took Tyler for ice cream after his summer day camp. One evening later that week, as I helped Tyler practice penalty kicks at the park, golden hour sunlight casting long shadows across the grass, he asked a question that caught me off guard. "Are you happier now, Mom?" I paused, the soccer ball momentarily forgotten at my feet. In the rush of rebuilding our lives, I hadn't really considered my own happiness separately from his. The question required honest reflection rather than an automatic reassurance. The answer came easily. "Yes, I am." Tyler nodded thoughtfully, retrieving the ball. "Me too," he said, lining up another shot with careful precision. "I like knowing what's going to happen next." His simple observation captured exactly what had changed in our lives. The unpredictability of Dean's presence had been replaced by something more valuable: consistency and peace. The constant anxiety of waiting for another disappointment had lifted, leaving room for genuine joy to take root. As we walked home hand in hand through the summer twilight, fireflies beginning to illuminate the path ahead of us, I realized my revenge hadn't been about the public humiliation or even the divorce papers with their ironic cupcake. Those had been satisfying but ultimately superficial victories. The true revenge was this: building a life where Dean's absence was no longer a disappointment but a relief. A life where Tyler didn't anxiously watch the door, where I didn't construct elaborate excuses for broken promises, where both of us could thrive within the boundaries of realistic expectations rather than perpetual hope. "Race you to the corner?" Tyler challenged, already breaking into a run. I laughed and sprinted after him, our shadows stretching ahead of us, pointing toward home. My favorite part was when Amanda delivered those divorce papers with a "good luck" cupcake. Pure genius. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. If you enjoyed Amanda's journey to reclaiming her dignity, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. My stepsister announced her pregnancy at my graduation party, stealing all attention. "Sorry to overshadow your little diploma," she whispered to me. 3 months later at her baby shower, I arrived with my new husband, her former fiancé, who discovered the baby wasn't his and that we'd always been meant to be together. "Sorry to overshadow your little diploma," Vanessa whispered, her glossy lips barely moving as she hugged me with one arm, the other hand protectively cradling her still flat stomach. The words slithered into my ear while camera flashes exploded around us. My graduation party, the celebration I'd spent weeks planning, instantly transformed into her impromptu baby shower. I stood frozen in my cap and gown, diploma case clutched in white-knuckled fingers, as my father and stepmother rushed to embrace their daughter. My achievement, summa cum laude in biomedical engineering, evaporated like morning mist under the blazing sun of Vanessa's perfectly timed pregnancy announcement. It wasn't the first time she'd stolen my spotlight. It was just the most devastating. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible journey. If you're enjoying these stories of empowerment, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us build this amazing community. Let's dive in. Growing up, I'd poured everything into my studies. While other kids played after school, I studied. While teenagers went to parties, I prepared for exams. My entire identity had been crafted around academic excellence. Partly because I loved learning, but mostly because it was the one arena where Vanessa couldn't outshine me. My stepsister excelled at something far more valuable in our family: social performance. She knew exactly when to laugh, what to wear, and how to make people feel important. She'd mastered the art of being the center of attention by age 12. The year her mother married my father and our lives became permanently entangled. The day they moved in, I was setting up a display for my science fair project. A working model of renewable energy that had won regional recognition. My father had promised to help me transport it to the state competition the next morning. "Daddy, look what I made." Vanessa had called from the doorway, holding up a basic watercolor painting of our newly blended family. Her mother had cooed about her artistic talent, and my father, who'd never shown much interest in my academic achievements, had immediately displayed it on the refrigerator. My science project went to the competition in the back of my teacher's station wagon. My father had forgotten. The pattern continued through middle school and high school. My straight A's were acknowledged with perfunctory praise, while Vanessa's B- average was celebrated as if she'd split the atom. My acceptance to a prestigious university warranted a dinner at Olive Garden. Vanessa's acceptance to community college merited a backyard barbecue with 30 guests. "Earth to Emma." A familiar voice pulled me from my bitter memories. I blinked, surprised to find myself still standing in my kitchen, coffee gone cold in my hands as I stared at the graduation party invitation I'd been about to mail. The voice belonged to Noah, Vanessa's fiancé, and once upon a time my childhood best friend. "Sorry," I muttered, setting down my mug. Lost in thought. Noah leaned against my counter, his presence in my apartment unexpected but not unwelcome. He'd stopped by to pick up some family photos Vanessa wanted for their wedding slideshow. Since their engagement 8 months ago, he'd become increasingly integrated into family events, though this was the first time he'd visited my place alone. "Excited about graduation?" he asked, nodding toward the invitation. "As excited as anyone would be about 4 years of brutal work finally ending," I replied, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Noah studied me with the kind of scrutiny that made me wonder if he could still read my thoughts like he could when we were kids. Before Vanessa. Before everything changed. Your dad's proud of you, you know, he said softly. He talks about his brilliant daughter all the time. I snorted. To who? Certainly not to me. Noah shifted uncomfortably. He mentioned your research project to me last week. The one about targeted drug delivery systems. That's surprising. I felt a flicker of warmth, quickly extinguished by doubt. Did Vanessa happen to be in the room when he said it? Noah's silence was answer enough. We'd been inseparable as children, Noah and I. Living next door to each other, building forts, trading books, dreaming about traveling the world together someday. Then puberty struck, his family moved across town, and Vanessa ensured our paths rarely crossed except at obligatory family gatherings. By the time I left for college, he was firmly in her orbit. Their engagement announcement last summer had been painful in ways I couldn't fully articulate, even to myself. I like what you've done with the place, Noah said, clearly trying to change the subject as he glanced around my small but meticulously organized apartment. Very you. Is that a compliment or an insult? I asked, only half joking. Definitely a compliment, he replied, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my stomach flip. It's good to see pieces of the real Emma. Sometimes I feel like you disappeared. The statement hung between us, heavy with unspoken history. For a moment I saw a flash of the boy who'd once known me better than anyone else in the world. The real Emma's been here all along, I said quietly. Just buried under textbooks and lab reports. Noah stepped closer, his eyes scanning my face as if searching for something. I miss her. The girl who used to tell me which constellations were which. Who corrected our 5th grade teacher about dinosaurs. That girl grew up, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. She had to. Did she? Or did she just go into hiding? Before I could answer, his phone buzzed. Vanessa's custom ringtone. Noah stepped back, the moment shattered as he checked his screen. I should go, he said, suddenly all business again. Vanessa needs me to pick up her dress from the alterations place. He grabbed the envelope of photos I'd set aside for him. Thanks for these. And hey, I'm really looking forward to your graduation party. It'll be great. As he headed for the door, he paused. For what it's worth, Emma, I see you. The real you. I always have. The door closed behind him, leaving me alone with a cold cup of coffee and the unexpected spark of something I'd thought long extinguished. Something dangerous. What I didn't know then, couldn't have known, was that this brief conversation would be the first domino in a sequence that would ultimately change everything. That in just 3 months, I would walk into Vanessa's baby shower on Noah's arm as his wife, ready to deliver the final act in a drama my stepsister had unwittingly scripted herself. But that afternoon, all I felt was confusion and the faintest flicker of hope that perhaps, after all these years living in Vanessa's shadow, someone still remembered who I really was. 3 weeks after Noah's unexpected visit, my graduation day arrived under perfect blue skies. For once, everything was going according to plan. The ceremony had been mercifully brief, my name announced correctly, and my handshake with the university president firm and confident. I'd even spotted my father standing and applauding as I crossed the stage, a gesture so unexpected that I nearly tripped on my way back to my seat. The party afterward, hosted at my father and stepmother's suburban home, exceeded my modest expectations. The backyard was transformed with white tents, fairy lights, and tasteful blue and silver decorations, my university colors. A banner proclaiming, "Congratulations, Emma," hung across the back porch. For the first time in memory, this celebration was undeniably mine. Speech, someone called as I mingled with guests, diploma holder tucked under my arm. My father approached with a glass of champagne, placing it in my hand before gently guiding me toward the small wooden platform they'd set up near the garden. I'm not really prepared, I started, but Dad squeezed my shoulder. Just speak from the heart, kiddo, he said, using the nickname I hadn't heard in years. Standing before the gathered crowd, professors, classmates, family, friends, and relatives, I felt a rare surge of confidence. Thank you all for coming today, I began, my voice steadier than expected. This degree represents thousands of hours of work, hundreds of late nights, and more coffee than any human should consume in 4 years. Gentle laughter rippled through the audience. My stepmother, Patricia, beamed from beside the cake table. Even my cantankerous grandfather, who rarely left his retirement community, nodded approvingly. I wouldn't be standing here without the support of many people in this garden, I continued, making brief eye contact with my research advisor, my freshman roommate who'd become a dear friend, and finally my father. Dad, thank you for... Oh my goodness, I can't hold it in anymore. The high-pitched exclamation cut through my speech like a knife. All heads turned toward the patio doors where Vanessa stood, radiant in a pale pink sundress that accentuated her slender figure. Noah appeared behind her, his expression unreadable as Vanessa clutched his hand and pulled him forward. Noah and I have an announcement, she trilled, her free hand moving to rest on her stomach in the universal gesture of expectant motherhood. We're pregnant. You're all going to be aunties and uncles and grandparents. The silence lasted precisely 2 seconds before erupting into chaos. Patricia screamed with delight, rushing toward her daughter. My father's face transformed with a joy I'd never seen directed at me. Guests abandoned their positions facing me, converging instead around Vanessa and Noah like metal filings drawn to a magnet. I remained frozen on the platform, champagne glass dangling from suddenly numb fingers, my unfinished speech dying on my lips. No one seemed to notice or care that I was still standing there. No one except Noah, whose eyes briefly met mine over the crowd surrounding him. His expression, was it apology? Discomfort? Regret? Flickered for just a moment before Vanessa pulled his face down for a kiss, effectively breaking our connection. Slowly I stepped down from the platform. The crowd had naturally divided the backyard in two. The vibrant, excited throng clustered around Vanessa near the house, and the empty, abandoned celebration space with its now meaningless decorations celebrating my achievement. I retreated to the far corner of the yard, leaning against the old oak tree that had been my childhood refuge. From this vantage point I observed the scene with detached numbness. My father lifting a toast to his future grandchild. My stepmother already on her phone, presumably sharing the news with everyone in her contact list. Noah standing rigidly beside Vanessa, his smile not quite reaching his eyes as he accepted congratulatory handshakes. She certainly knows how to make an entrance. The voice beside me belonged to Diane Miller, my mother's best friend before her death 15 years ago. One of the few connections to my mother that remained, Diane had stayed part of my life despite the awkwardness that sometimes accompanied her presence at family gatherings. Impeccable timing as always, I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Diane sipped her wine, her shrewd eyes never leaving Vanessa. You know, in all my years teaching high school drama, I've rarely seen someone who commits so completely to her performances. What do you mean? Just an observation, Diane said carefully. Vanessa reminds me of my star pupil from 2015. Brilliant actress, totally convincing on stage. Off stage. Well, let's just say the audience only saw what she wanted them to see. I studied Vanessa across the yard. She was crying now, delicate tears that didn't disturb her perfect makeup, one hand pressed to her heart, the other still firmly clutching Noah's arm. The timing of each gesture seemed almost choreographed. Noah doesn't look like an ecstatic father-to-be, Diane observed quietly. He was right. While everyone around him bubbled with excitement, Noah stood with the stiff posture of someone enduring rather than celebrating. When Patricia hugged him, his arms remained awkwardly at his sides for several seconds before he remembered to return the embrace. Did you know? I asked Diane. About the baby? Oh. About troubles in paradise? Let's just say I ran into Noah at Wilson's pharmacy last week. He was buying antacids and looking like he hadn't slept in days. She patted my arm. Not everyone is as skilled at maintaining facades as your stepsister. Before I could respond, Vanessa detached herself from the crowd and glided toward us, her face a portrait of radiant joy. Noah followed a few steps behind, his expression now carefully neutral. Emma, she cried, embracing me with one arm. Isn't this just the most perfect day? Your graduation and our baby announcement. Her voice was honey-sweet, meant to be overheard by anyone nearby. Then she leaned closer, her lips near my ear, and whispered those cutting words. Sorry to overshadow your little diploma. As she pulled back, her smile never faltered. But in that moment I saw something I'd never noticed before. A calculation behind her eyes, an awareness of exactly what she was doing and the impact it would have. Congratulations, I managed to say, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. What wonderful news. Vanessa turned to float back toward her admirers, pulling Noah along. But as they walked away, I caught Noah glancing back at me, his expression unguarded for just a second. And what I saw there wasn't happiness or pride. It was desperation. 2 weeks after my graduation party disaster, I sought refuge in Brood Awakening, a tiny coffee shop tucked away in a forgotten corner of downtown. It had become my sanctuary during college, a place where nobody knew me as Vanessa's plain stepsister, or measured my worth against hers. The baristas knew my order: extra-large dark roast, no room, and the worn leather armchair in the back corner might as well have had my name engraved on it. I was halfway through reviewing a job application when the bell above the door jingled. I glanced up reflexively, then immediately ducked behind my laptop screen. Noah stood at the counter, dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed, looking nothing like the polished architect who typically accompanied Vanessa to family gatherings. "Make it a double," he told the barista, his voice carrying across the nearly empty cafe. "Actually, triple if that's a thing." I contemplated slipping out the back exit, but before I could gather my things, Noah turned and spotted me. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by something that looked oddly like relief. "Emma," he said, approaching my table. "Mind if I join you?" Hesitantly, I moved my bag from the opposite chair. "Rough morning." "Rough week," he corrected, slumping into the seat. Up close, his exhaustion was even more apparent. Vanessa's morning sickness only seems to happen when she wants attention or sympathy. Miraculously disappears when her friends invite her for mimosa brunch. The bitter edge in his voice caught me off guard. In all the years I'd known him as Vanessa's boyfriend, I'd never heard him speak about her with anything but admiration. "Can pregnant women drink mimosas?" I asked, genuinely confused. Noah's laugh held no humor. "That's exactly what I asked. Apparently questioning her makes me unsupportive and toxic." He rubbed his temples. "Sorry. I shouldn't be dumping this on you." "It's fine," I said, surprising myself by meaning it. Sometimes it's easier to talk to someone outside the situation. We fell into conversation more naturally than I would have expected. We discussed my job prospects, his recent architectural project, and reminisced about the tree house he'd designed for us when we were 12. His first blueprint, drawn on graph paper stolen from his father's office. That initial coincidental meeting turned into a standing Tuesday morning coffee date. Each week, Noah would arrive looking increasingly troubled, and each week he would share another piece of information that chipped away at Vanessa's carefully constructed image. "She told her mother the baby's due in January," he mentioned during our third coffee meeting. "But she told my parents March." When I pointed out the discrepancy, she blamed pregnancy brain. By our fifth meeting, his casual complaints had evolved into serious concerns. "The timeline doesn't add up, Emma," he confided, voice low despite the cafe's ambient noise providing privacy. "According to when she claims we conceived, she should be showing more. The doctor wants to do another ultrasound because the measurements seem off." "Maybe it's just a small baby?" I suggested, trying to be fair despite my growing unease. "Maybe." Noah stared into his coffee. "Or maybe there's another explanation." I didn't ask what he meant. Part of me didn't want to know, didn't want to be pulled further into their relationship drama. But another part, the part that remembered building cardboard rocket ships with the boy across from me, couldn't bear seeing him so tormented. During our sixth meeting, Noah arrived clutching a manila folder. "I found this in Vanessa's desk drawer," he said, sliding it across the table. "I was looking for stamps, but..." He trailed off, gesturing for me to open it. Inside were medical records, Vanessa's name clearly printed at the top of each page. I frowned, uncomfortable with the invasion of privacy. "Noah, I shouldn't be looking at these." "Just the dates, Emma." "Look at the dates." I skimmed the documents, my eyes catching on a gynecological visit from 4 months prior. The notes referenced a discussion about fertility options and a prescription for prenatal vitamins. 4 months ago, Vanessa had been in Cancun with her college friends, a girls-only trip that Noah hadn't been invited to join. "She told me she got pregnant during our weekend in the Poconos," Noah said, his voice hollow. 6 weeks ago." My stomach twisted. This could just be preparation. Maybe she was planning to start trying soon and wanted to be healthy first. Noah pulled out another paper, a lab report. "This is from 3 months ago. HCG levels consistent with early pregnancy. The implication hung between us, impossible to ignore." If Vanessa had been pregnant 3 months ago, Noah couldn't be the father. I don't understand, I said finally. Why lie about it? Why not just tell you she was already pregnant? Noah's laugh was harsh, devoid of joy. Because she wasn't sure I'd stay. We'd been fighting constantly before that Poconos trip. I was reconsidering the engagement. The pregnancy announcement locked me in. His fingers trembled as he gathered the papers. She knew exactly what she was doing at your graduation party. It wasn't just about stealing your moment. It was about making a public declaration that would be impossible for me to question without looking like the villain. My mind raced through implications. Do you know who might be? I have suspicions, Noah said grimly. Her ex, Tyler, has been texting her constantly. She says it's about a joint investment they made before we got engaged, but the messages I've seen are not about money. We sat in silence, the weight of his discovery pressing down on us. Finally, I reached across the table and took his hand. The gesture felt simultaneously foreign and familiar, like returning to a childhood home years after moving away. What are you going to do? I asked softly. Noah's eyes met mine, clear and determined despite his obvious pain. First, I need to confirm my suspicions. Then, he squeezed my hand. Then I need to figure out how to build a life that's authentic, not based on deception. I've spent years living Vanessa's version of my life. I barely recognize myself anymore. In that moment, something shifted between us. A reconnection to the friendship we'd once shared, but with new dimensions neither of us was ready to name. Thank you, he said quietly. For being someone I can trust with the truth. For being real in a way Vanessa never was. As we parted that day, I felt simultaneously lighter and burdened, lifted by the rekindling of our connection, yet weighed down by the knowledge of what awaited Noah and by extension my family. The carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack, and none of us could predict what would remain standing when it finally shattered. For a week after Noah showed me Vanessa's medical records, I wrestled with my conscience. Each night, I'd lie awake debating what my role should be in this unfolding drama. Was I helping Noah uncover a painful truth he deserved to know, or was I enabling the destruction of my family's fragile peace? The line between justice and revenge blurred every time I recalled Vanessa's whispered taunt at my graduation party. I'd just arrived home from work when my phone buzzed with a text from Noah. Can you meet me? Need to talk. Important. We met at a park bench overlooking the river, neutral territory far from coffee shops or family homes. Noah paced back and forth, hands jammed in his pockets. I confronted her, he said without preamble, his voice rough. Last night. My stomach dropped. What happened? Exactly what you'd expect. Denial. Gaslighting. Then when I showed her the paperwork, she switched to tears and accusations. He finally sat beside me, shoulders hunched. She admitted it, Emma. The baby isn't mine. It's Tyler's. Despite suspecting this truth, hearing it confirmed sent a shock through me. I'm so sorry, Noah. She begged me not to tell anyone. Said we could raise the baby as mine, that no one would ever know. His laugh held no humor. When I refused, she threatened to tell everyone I cheated on her, that I was abusive. Said she'd make sure I lost my partnership at the firm. She wouldn't, I whispered, though we both knew she absolutely would. She's already started, Noah said, showing me his phone. On the screen was a group text to his friends, claiming Noah had been controlling and had abandoned her during her pregnancy. This is just the beginning. The next 24 hours unfolded like a fever dream. Noah stayed at a hotel while Vanessa launched a preemptive campaign, calling family members with her version of events. My father phoned me, demanding to know if I'd been filling Noah's head with lies about Vanessa. When I tried explaining, he hung up on me. By evening, the battle lines were drawn. Most of the family rallied around Vanessa, the supposedly abandoned pregnant woman. Only Diane stood firmly in Noah's corner, and surprisingly so did I. I need concrete proof, Emma, Noah said when we spoke that night. Something irrefutable. What about the medical records? She claimed they were misdated. That her doctor made a clerical error. I thought for a moment. Her phone. Tyler's messages would be there. She never lets that thing out of her sight, Noah sighed. She takes it to the bathroom. The solution came to me suddenly. The cloud backup. Does she use your laptop? Sometimes. When hers is charging. And you share an Apple account for family sharing, right? Noah's eyes widened as he caught my meaning. Her messages would sync to the cloud. The next day he forwarded me screenshots. Dozens of messages between Vanessa and Tyler, dating back months before the supposed conception, continuing through the Cancun trip and even after the graduation party announcement. The most damning was Tyler asking when she planned to tell Noah the truth, with her response, "Never." Noah's stable, reliable, the perfect father figure. What he doesn't know won't hurt him. Armed with evidence, Noah confronted Vanessa again, this time at my apartment with me present as a witness. She arrived looking like the picture of maternal virtue in a flowing dress, her hand protectively cradling her stomach. "This intervention is ridiculous," she began, settling onto my couch. "I'm under enough stress without." Noah silently handed her the printed screenshots. I watched her expression shift from confusion to shock to calculated fury. "You invaded my privacy," she hissed. "This is illegal. I could press charges." "Go ahead," Noah replied calmly. "Explain to the judge why you were discussing how to trick me into raising another man's child." What followed was the most vicious display of Vanessa I'd ever witnessed. She threatened, pleaded, and manipulated in rapid succession. When nothing worked, she turned on me. "You've always been jealous of me," she spat. "Always wanting what I have. This is your pathetic attempt to steal my life." "No, Vanessa," I said quietly. "This is about honesty. Something you've never valued." She stormed out, promising destruction. True to her word, within hours, my phone exploded with messages from family members. My father demanded I apologize to Vanessa. My cousins called me a homewrecker. Only silence from my stepmother, Patricia, which I interpreted as disappointment. Then unexpectedly my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Patricia stood there looking older than I'd ever seen her. "May I come in?" she asked softly. Warily I let her inside. She perched on the edge of my armchair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I received some disturbing messages today," she began. "About you and Noah conspiring against Vanessa." "It's not like that," I started to defend, but she held up her hand. "I know," she said simply. "I've always known who my daughter is." The admission stunned me into silence. "Vanessa has been manipulating people since she was a child," Patricia continued, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "I tried so many interventions. Therapy, discipline, heart-to-hearts. Nothing worked. By the time she was a teenager, I realized she simply lacks whatever makes most people empathetic." She looked at me directly. "I saw how she treated you all these years. How she deliberately overshadowed your every achievement. I should have intervened more firmly, and for that I'm truly sorry." "You believe us about the baby?" I asked cautiously. Patricia nodded. I suspected something was off with her timeline. And to be honest, I've never seen Vanessa and Noah truly connect. Not the way you two always did before she came between you. Her support changed everything. With Patricia's help, we gathered the family to present the evidence. While not everyone was immediately convinced, enough doubt was cast that Vanessa's power over the narrative crumbled. Tyler, confronted by Noah, admitted everything, even offering to take a paternity test. In the aftermath, Noah and I found ourselves drawing closer. What began as mutual support evolved into something deeper. We were careful, both aware of how our relationship would appear from the outside. But there was an undeniable rightness to being together, like returning to a path we should have followed years ago. "I've wasted so much time living someone else's version of my life," Noah told me one evening as we walked along the riverfront. "I don't want to waste any more." When he kissed me for the first time, it felt like the most honest moment of my life. 2 weeks later, in a quiet courthouse ceremony with only Diane and Patricia as witnesses, we became husband and wife. No grand gestures, no elaborate performances, just a simple, authentic commitment between two people who had finally found their way back to each other. "Ready to face whatever comes next?" Noah asked as we signed the marriage certificate. Looking into his eyes, I knew that whatever storms Vanessa might still unleash, we would weather them together. Absolutely ready. 3 months after my graduation party, almost to the day, Noah and I stood hand in hand outside my father's house. The front yard was decorated with pink and blue balloons, and a banner reading Vanessa's baby shower hung across the porch. Despite everything that had happened, Patricia had insisted on hosting the shower, though her reasons were more complex than simple maternal duty. "Are you sure about this?" Noah asked, his wedding band catching the afternoon sunlight as he squeezed my hand. I took a deep breath. "Absolutely sure." We hadn't planned to make a dramatic entrance at Vanessa's baby shower. In fact, we hadn't planned to attend at all. Our quiet courthouse wedding 2 weeks earlier had been followed by an impromptu honeymoon to a lakeside cabin, a deliberate retreat from the storm we knew awaited us upon our return. But Patricia's call yesterday had changed everything. "Vanessa's telling everyone Noah abandoned her because of the pregnancy complications," she'd explained, her voice strained. "She's claiming you seduced him during his moment of weakness." The story gets more elaborate with each telling. Patricia's sigh had carried the weight of years dealing with her daughter's manipulations. "It's time to end this cycle, Emma. For all our sakes." So here we stood, about to walk into a gathering where most attendees believed we were the villains of the story. Noah straightened his shoulders. "Let's do this." The collective gasp as we entered the living room was almost comical. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Punch cups froze halfway to lips. In the center of it all sat Vanessa on a decorated chair, an impressive baby bump protruding beneath her pastel maternity dress, opening a gift box. Her eyes widened at our appearance, then narrowed dangerously. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. Patricia stepped forward from where she'd been arranging food. "I invited them, Vanessa. This has gone far enough." "You invited them?" Vanessa's voice rose incredulously. "After what they did to me. After he abandoned me and his child." Noah's grip on my hand tightened, but his voice remained calm. "I can't abandon a child that isn't mine, Vanessa." The room erupted in whispers. My father stepped forward, face flushed with anger. "Now listen here." "Dad," I interrupted, finding confidence I never knew I possessed. "There's documented proof. Medical records showing Vanessa was already pregnant before the weekend she claims she conceived with Noah. Text messages between her and the actual father. DNA test results." I paused, letting the information sink in. "We've tried handling this privately, but Vanessa keeps spreading lies." Vanessa stood up, one hand protectively on her stomach. "These are outrageous accusations. I have a medical condition that made the dates appear earlier. My doctor can confirm." "Your doctor already confirmed the opposite," Patricia interjected quietly. "I spoke with Dr. Levine myself." The look of betrayal Vanessa shot her mother would have melted steel. "Why?" asked my Aunt Margaret, who had always adored Vanessa. "Why lie about something so important?" Vanessa's composure began to crack. "You don't understand. Noah was going to leave me. You needed to trap me," Noah finished for her. "But it wasn't just about the baby, was it, Vanessa? Tell them about the credit cards." This was news even to me. I glanced at Noah questioningly. Vanessa's face drained of color as Patricia cleared her throat. "I found numerous credit card statements in Noah's name. Accounts he never opened, with over $50,000 in charges. Designer clothes, spa treatments, weekend getaways with." She trailed off meaningfully. "Identity theft," Noah explained to the stunned room. "Along with reproductive coercion. That's why we're here today, not for revenge but to stop the deceptions before they hurt more people." Vanessa's carefully constructed facade finally shattered completely. "You think you're so perfect, don't you?" she shrieked, pointing at me. "Little Miss Summa Cum Laude with your pathetic diploma and your high-minded principles. You've always been jealous of me. Always wanted what was mine." "That's not true, Vanessa," I said softly. "I only ever wanted to be valued for who I actually am." The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. Patricia moved to answer it, returning moments later with an unexpected guest. Tyler Davidson, Vanessa's ex-boyfriend and, as we now knew, the father of her baby. "Sorry I'm late," he said awkwardly, looking around the room. I got your text, Vanessa." "I didn't text you," Vanessa snapped, panic edging into her voice. Tyler looked confused. "Yes, you did. You said you were finally telling everyone the truth and wanted me here for support." He pulled out his phone, showing a text that had indeed come from Vanessa's number. All eyes turned to Patricia, who held up Vanessa's phone. "I sent it," she admitted. It was time for complete honesty. What followed was both painful and necessary. Tyler, equally victimized by Vanessa's manipulations, revealed how she had continued their relationship in secret while engaged to Noah, how she had told him the baby was Noah's when she first discovered her pregnancy, then reversed course when Noah began pulling away. One by one, attendees began to leave, murmuring awkward goodbyes and avoiding eye contact. Eventually, only the central players remained. Vanessa now collapsed on the couch, Tyler sitting uncomfortably across from her, Patricia and my father standing together near the fireplace, and Noah and me by the doorway. "What happens now?" my father finally asked, his voice small and defeated. "Now," Patricia said firmly, "we help Vanessa get the support she needs. Therapy. Accountability. Real consequences for her actions." "And the baby?" Tyler asked. "We do right by this child," Noah said. "Whatever our personal feelings, an innocent baby shouldn't suffer for any of this." In that moment, watching these broken relationships begin the long process toward honesty, I realized something profound. The revenge I had imagined would feel sweet, walking into Vanessa's shower with Noah as my husband, had instead become something else entirely. Not an act of spite but of truth-telling. Not an ending but a beginning. 6 months later, Noah and I hosted a small dinner party in our new apartment. Patricia was there, as was my father, tentatively rebuilding his relationship with me. Diane came too, bringing her famous apple pie. And surprisingly, so did Vanessa, noticeably humbled by new motherhood and the court-mandated therapy she was undergoing as part of her identity theft plea agreement. Her son, barely 2 months old, slept peacefully in a portable bassinet while Tyler, now taking his co-parenting responsibilities seriously, occasionally checked on him. "He has your eyes," I told Vanessa during a quiet moment in the kitchen. She studied me for a long moment. "I'm trying, Emma. To be better. It doesn't come naturally to me, but I'm trying." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step toward something neither of us had experienced before. An authentic relationship built on truth rather than competition. As Noah slipped his arm around my waist later that evening, he whispered, "Who would have thought your graduation party would lead to all this?" I leaned against him, watching my complicated, imperfect family attempting to build something new from the ashes of so many facades. "Sometimes," I replied, "the truth is the best revenge of all."